to the Harrison Boone podcast.
What's the difference between CPM steels and regular steels?
It's pretty much sprinkled in the sheet form, like the final form. It's actually sprinkled. And then...
What is sprinkled?
The elements are sprinkled.
The elements.
So
steel is two or more
the
elements.
iron, carbon, the chromium, vanadium, manganese, all that sort of stuff gets sprinkled evenly so that it's not all bunched together. Like some steels you'll see the alloy banding in it, where the CPM stuff is just very even, so everything's just like there's no weak spots or anything like that.
It says here CPM is the trademarked name for a process that is also called powdered metallurgy or PM steel. CPM makes the steel stronger than the same steel using a conventional steel manufacturing process.
Which is
CPM makes the steel more resistant to breaking, fracturing or chipping.
That's pretty much what I said.
Yeah.
By it being not more carbon at one end of the bar or to the other. So
would a knife maker like yourself prefer to use a CPM stock as opposed to a regular steel stock?
Definitely. It's more, normally CPM steel is more wear resistant, so that's great for a knife properties, but it's also hell on the belts and equipment. So you'll go through
steel, right?
More wear resistant. So there's hardness and toughness and wear resistance and corrosion resistance, and they're the they're the four main properties that you look for of a knife. Yeah.
So for those of you that have just joined us, we've come in mid-conversation. I'm sitting here with Luke Berkelmans from Makesmith Knives, and if you want to find Luke, you're on Instagram.
Yep, I've got Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is make_smith, and Facebook is just Makesmith.
I think anyone that's just joined us for the chat can tell already that you know what you're talking about when it comes to making knives.
Glad we got that out of the way.
So let's start off at the beginning. So what got you into the idea of making knives? I mean, that's not something everyone wants to do in their spare time, right?
I've always been a maker. I like creating things. It's a weird one. A friend of mine made a knife, and I told him, I said I could do better than that, and he said no, you couldn't. So he's another Dutch guy. So
what's with the Dutch?
I don't know. We just understand each other better. So I kept going until he conceded that I was better than him.
Fair.
And I've kept going, and it's a great community, and it's a good creative outlet, and it's really supportive. Got me through a really tough time too. And I sort of grew up not in the bush, but on bush blocks, and you go down the backyard and make a cubby with a knife, and I've travelled all around Australia on a motorbike and take the knife.
Yeah, you're quite an adventurous guy, aren't you, in your spare time? I've seen a lot of your adventures where you'll just pack up a swag and head off on the bike. And not as much as I'd like to, but yeah. No one ever does it as much as they'd like to.
Or as much as I make out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just those two motorbike trips around Australia.
So the motivation really was spiteful. You wanted to prove that you could make a quality knife, or was it something you were already interested
friendly competition. The society suppresses the why we like knives, and it's a bit of a, I don't know, one of those.
I don't know why the idea of my dad always carried a pocket knife or a Leatherman fold-out multi-tool with a knife on it, right? And his dad, whenever I saw walking around in the garden, he always had a pocket knife or a Leatherman on him. And I find like that was just an older generational thing. Like to carry a pocket knife, to be handy, to be able to open packaging or put a loose screw in. Or it's like the older generation carried tools on them. And then that seems to have almost been lost to this generation where everything's so disposable now. You don't need to fix anything anymore. And with that new way of thinking eliminates the need to carry those things, or at least people don't see the need for you to be doing that.
And a few sort of, bad eggs wreck it for everyone else too. Yeah. So, it's not...
I mean, I don't think...
Like laws and stuff, you're not allowed to carry knives, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think criminals should be carrying knives for obvious reasons, but I think, if say someone in my position who works in a trade environment, if I want to carry a pocket knife, because I use a knife just as much as I use a hammer now. Everything comes in packages, everything needs to be opened, and down to the material that we install as well. Everything's getting thinner and lighter, and so you're more likely to cut something with a knife now, especially say you're wrapping a house and sarking. It's so handy to have a pocket knife on you, because sometimes the Stanley knives, the amount of knife that sticks out of a Stanley knife just isn't enough to go through, like, say, insulation. Like, you have to kind of score it a few times, whereas a pocket knife goes straight through. Wipe it on a bit of leather to sharpen it back up, and away you go. And that seems to be getting less and less in society now.
Yeah. You can be charged for having a pocket knife within, or a Stanley knife within reach in your work van now, if the cop so chooses to.
But then the silly thing about that is criminals just get around that by carrying a screwdriver. Like, a screwdriver is just as deadly as a pocket knife.
If you want to hurt someone, you want to hurt someone.
Yeah.
It's a common misconception. I meet people and they're like, "Oh, you make knives? Oh, do you stab people?" Like, "Oh, okay, that's an interesting jump, and you're probably the reason why,
There is that opinion out there. So now that you've gotten into, so we've established how you got started. Should we tell people about how we met?
Yeah.
So I was across a number of different Facebook groups that are for outdoors enthusiasts, camping, hiking, everyday carry items, knives, backpacks.
This is about 5 years ago?
Yeah, probably going back about that far, yeah. And I was just sort of getting into the idea of self-reliance, survival, that sort of stuff. And it, I think it probably stemmed from
cash up
watching...
cash up trading.
Yeah, it probably stemmed from watching way too much Bear Grylls. And then, yeah...
Terrible knives, by the way, people. Don't buy anything by Bear Grylls.
Gerber's Bear Grylls line is... Yeah, it's pretty... Look, it's good entry-level stuff. I'll say that. For people just...
You said that. I didn't say that.
Yeah, I'm happy to stand by it. I think that for people that are just getting into the idea of self-reliance, going into the bush, taking a knife and an axe...
Buy more up, people. Go to your Total Tools. You can't write... Can we say brand names here?
You can say brand names, yeah.
Just go to your local tool shop and buy a $18 Mora, and or Baco make the same...
Baco
make the same... They make the same knife. It's $18.
Anything Barco make is good.
Buy one of those, and that's all the knife you need camping. Or buy one of mine. Hey,
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
I'm under no illusions that what I make is a luxury item, and in this sort of
they're designed to be used, right?
Well, they're designed to be used. They'd be designed. The fantasy is that they get handed down to generations. That's what I'm making for. But I'm under no illusion that they're a handmade knife that people don't need. They really don't need what I make, and it's a luxury item. It's a wantful thing that people will see, and they need it in their life. So that's what I'm making. But it's definitely a luxury item to have.
I feel like if you need to cut something, you need what you make.
You can have a box cutter. You can have a Mora.
Sell your items, bro. This is your chance to...
No. It's look. I do it if I wanted to.
Luke makes amazing quality products, and if you're in the market for a good bushcraft survival knife, go to Luke's page.
Hunting and camping, outdoors knives is what I do, and it's a lot of people do kitchen knives, and I eat cereal for dinner most nights, so I'm not a cooker, but I am a go out into Australia on a motorbike by myself for 21 days sort of thing.
Well, that's what I like about what you make, is you make things that you yourself find useful based on your practical uses for those.
I try and sell them at a price point that if I add up hours that I put into a knife and the materials, and then I have a little equation for how long the knife is, and how much time I put into it and my time, and then I come up with a number and I throw that number out the window and I choose a lesser number because I couldn't sell it for what it's cost me to make. So I'm doing it as a hobby still, but I probably make about 200 knives a year at least. And if I wanted to be rich, I wouldn't be a knife maker, but it's led to running classes and having events at my property. I just had the 4th Waterfall Road hammer-in, so I have about, this one was about...
What's a hammer-in?
Hammer-in is an American term that we've pinched, and you have a gathering of blacksmiths or knife makers. So we've got people from all over the East Coast came to my property 2 weeks ago, and we had camping, blacksmithing demos, free material, lots of hands-on experience for the weekend. Bonfires. Camping.
And so what would you do with people at this hammer-in? What would they learn? Because they're coming to your property, right, to make a knife? Is that right?
Well, there's the opportunity to make. There's coal forge, so there's a good mix of old and new. There's like coal forges, and Wayne Schmidt running, I think there were like 5 coal forges running.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he had a offsider, Rob, with him, and then at the other end of the spectrum we had a setup in the shed. I just bought an induction forge, which is a 15 kilowatt system, and you literally pass steel through copper coils and it heats up instantly. So about 3 seconds and you're at about 800 degrees, so you can start forging straight away.
Oh wow. So the coil induction forge is
magic. It works with magic.
Black magic, yeah. So you pass the steel through an opening,
no contact.
and there's coils, and you don't contact anything, and it just in the air will heat up the steel.
Yeah.
Have you tried putting other things in there?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
This doesn't warm up your willy, no.
It's on a cold morning.
And it was very high too, and I'm very short, so it was a real stretch to not electrocute myself.
So on a cold morning, you can't use it to warm.
Well, if you had a Prince
up.
Albert, you'd probably blow the end of your knob off. But anyway.
But it will heat up steel almost instantaneously to hundreds of degrees, so that you can start forging.
Yeah, like.
Would you say that there's? Do you enjoy the older methods of coal forging? Like, do you think that the traditional things are a little bit more interesting?
So when I work with steel, I'll make my own steel. So I make my own layered steel. So I forge, steel, multiple different layers together, and been playing with that for years. So I've got power hammer, 20-ton press, a rolling mill. Built the rolling mill, built the press, and so that's high carbon steel. I can't. Layering high carbon stainless steels is a lot more difficult, a lot more failures.
Why?
Because the steels react differently and they pull apart, and the expansion and contraction rate. Yeah, they just want to, because you're not welding, you're bonding metal together. So every time you see like a Damascus
for people
mosaic,
Damascus is layered steel into a pattern.
Yeah, you are upset people with saying Damascus, but if you have a mosaic Damascus compared to just layered steel, you've got tiled pattern welded steel joined on a 30-degree angle end to end. So there's I won't ever make it, but I'll make layered steel where it's got a lineal strength to it.
A lineal strength. Okay.
So it's not as pretty, but you can mess around.
What's the process of how do you layer steel? What's that process called?
So, just layered steel. It's bonded metal.
Walk me through the process of how you would layer a steel to make a knife.
So if you make like sanmai or gomai, sanmai I think it's 3 in Japanese, and that means 3 layers. Gomai is 5. So 3 layers. You have either a soft outer jacket, or you have or a high carbon with a higher nickel content to give a contrast when you etch it. But you prep the steel. You start off with something about 40 mil by 100, and you make 3 of them exactly the same size in 3 different. So you have like a sandwich, like if you want to think of it as 2 pieces of bread and a core, and you clean up the faces that are going to be welded to you don't have to go silly, probably like 50 grit. Put them together. I seam weld my billets. Harry's just giving me pointers on how to talking to
Yeah,
the
just
mic.
pull the microphone close to your face.
Yeah. I'm just licking it before, but somewhere in between that would be good. You put it together as you want it to come out. The same ratio that you start with is the same ratio that you finish with. So if you have like a 2-to-1 ratio, you end up with a 2-to-1 ratio in a thinner bar. It all depends on the geometry of the knife.
So you've got these 3 pieces of steel.
Yep.
What bonds them together?
So I TIG weld around the outside.
Okay.
Fully seam weld it.
So you seam weld the metals together.
Yep.
When they're in a bar form.
Yep, in a block form.
So
stacked together like a sandwich. I TIG weld around the outside. I use just a fusion method, so I'm not actually adding any mild steel or anything like that. That stops oxygen getting in when it's in the forge. So high carbon steels are done in a forge. You can do them in induction, but it's better in a forge because there's no atmosphere inside the forge because the fire's burning all the oxygen, and the oxygen will cause the scale to form, and then the material won't bond together. So I fully airtight weld the bar, the 3 pieces together. I put it in the forge. I bring it up to about 1250 degrees, and then I set the welds gently with a hammer, and you can just feel it when it goes together. But it's not welding as in welding. It's bonded, but it's bonded to a point where it's impossible to pull it apart. And then I draw that into a bar. You can put a pattern in it at that point, draw it into a bar, and then I sort of do a stock removal.
So a pattern means so you can twist it or bend it or
you can drill holes in it. You can do a ladder pattern. You can do raindrop. Even the shape of the dies will determine the pattern you get on the blade.
What's the shape of the die?
So when you have a drawing die, it's like 20 mil round bar on top and bottom. So it squishes the bar in a certain direction that you want to extrude the metal.
Okay.
And then I go from a 20-ton hydraulic press with drawing dies and flattening dies, depending on the pattern I want, to a rolling mill, which I built, and you just sort of run it through and it just extrudes the metal like they do in the actual foundries. But on a lot smaller level and just with your body weight standing on the roller.
And what will determine the different patterns? How do you get, if you wanted what you just mentioned,
how aggressively you go and the size of the dies and so the more layers you do, if you do 20 layers of alternating, say 1084, 1095 and 15N20, the 15N20's got a higher nickel content. It will be a lot brighter than it won't go as black as the...
it'll show through. It'll be like a brighter steel at the end, right?
So you get a contrast. You can add nickel in there. I've been adding stainless steel mesh in there, having a play with that. But all that's done in a gas forge, and then when you go to stainless steels, you have an electric kiln because it's got to go to much higher temps. It's got to sit around 1100 for up to 45 minutes at that temp so that you get the best out of that steel.
Okay.
And then it's plate quenched.
So whatever you layer the steels, whatever you use to layer the steels will determine how you forge and the temperatures that you use to forge.
You can forge at pretty high temps. After you set the weld at 1200, you can be forging in between 800 and 1000 degrees. So that's your working range, probably up to 1100.
You were saying if you use a stainless steel, it needs to be higher for longer.
Oh no, that's if you go from I'm jumping all over the shop. I apologise to the listener. I'll not finish sentences and
I'm just trying to keep up with the process here.
Mix stories together, and I apologise in advance. And Harry's looking at me. He's very intense.
Yeah. No one's going to accept your apologies. So just move forward. So when you are forging a stainless steel and you need a higher temperature for longer,
I won't lay a high carbon. I have, but the success rate is just
it's not there.
No.
Is it a much harder metal?
And
to
also,
work with?
it doesn't move the same. It's a lot harder to move under a press or. Some people have nailed it. A lot of factories, and you have zero atmosphere chambers and stuff like that, and huge amounts of pressure.
So they can sort of force metal to do what they want, bend to their will.
Takafu and stuff will make whatever steel they'll join copper and brass and and stainlesses together in a way that's just not possible at home.
Yeah, because you just can't replicate the conditions of a factory workshop in your backyard, can you?
No, and they're making in sheet form, and they're making massive quantities of it, and they've invested in millions of dollars worth of equipment.
And research and development.
Yeah, and success and lots of failures and working out how to do it. Yeah.
Which is I imagine would be near impossible for a small to medium sized knife maker to replicate those conditions and also to be able to use those materials effectively. So when you are going into the stainless realm, is there a big jump between
big process difference?
Yeah, like powdered stainless steels as opposed to like carbon steels. Is there a big jump in terms of equipment you need and the processes required to sort of forge those knives?
Totally different process. Oh, not totally different, but there's still a quench and a tempering cycle. Most stainlesses require a cryo cycle too, which is a in between quenching after you bring it up to an austenizing temperature and hold it. They've got a hold time. Sometimes they've got multiple hold points and then a hold time at a austenizing temp, which is usually over 1,000 degrees for a stainless. Inside a kiln, the knife is already cut out. There's no pre-grinding on it, and it's got all the holes it needs to have because you can't drill it afterwards.
Once it's hardened, it's hard to drill. Yeah,
it's impossible.
So you're better off doing all of the preliminary work of shaping the knife before
apart
it goes in.
Apart from bevels, because you can't. So when the stainless steel knife is in tool wrap inside the forge, so there's no atmosphere. There's oxygen inside the forge, but if you have it inside tool wrap, there's less oxygen, and you're trying
to minimise the scale build up on the knife.
Yeah, scale and decarbonisation. So the process is you bring up to temp. As soon as that temp and it's finished its cycle time, you pull it out and you put the knife in the tool wrap still in between two big plates of aluminium, and you blast it with cold air. You take it out of the tool wrap as soon as it's room temperature. You put it in either liquid nitrogen or dry ice.
Wow! You have to buy dry ice now.
Yeah, and that's the cheaper option. You can some stainless steels like 12C27, 14C28N. You can, and even Nitro V, you can get away with putting in the freezer for about an hour, and then they go into a tempering cycle, which is
that like putting them in the freezer? Does that just slowly bring down the temperature?
It converts retained austenite to martensite. That's the process. It's bringing it back. So if you go higher, a lot of carbon steels have a lot of high carbon stainless steels have a lot less carbon in it than high carbon steels. They've got about 0.6 compared to about 0.1 in carbon steels. Carbon gives it its strength. That's where the magic is. What was I going to say?
We were talking about the process of bringing stainless steel. Some stainless steels can be put in the freezer because you're trying to convert austenite.
Yeah, retained austenite
to martensite,
which is a crystalline structure in the steel.
Okay,
and it sounds like I know more than what I know.
Is that something to do with the carbides in the steel?
No, that's something different again, and that's a new sort of territory where like the powdered steel technologies will form carbides which have different properties and So the process of slow quenching. Sorry. Because I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So the process of slow quenching some steels in the freezer, right? It's a cryo. It's not part of the quench. It's a
cryo process. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose it is part of the quench. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that is to
make it tougher. So you'll
make it tougher.
Make it tougher.
Okay, that's what you're doing. You're making the steel tougher by doing that.
Yeah, you can also. Some steels will gain an extra couple of Rockwell after cryo. So and Rockwell is a scale that hardness is measured on.
Yeah, so diamond is one end and butter is at the other end, basically.
Actually, I don't know what it's actually based on.
I think it goes up to 60. I could be wrong. Higher than 60.
Yeah,
because I think Rockwell is like
so you got
up to a diamond hard or something.
B and C scale.
Yeah.
So B's for softer metals. It's for like the I don't know.
Does it go up to
under
70
25?
maybe?
No, I think it goes higher again. He's gonna Google it.
These numbers don't mean anything. There's basically the God particle at one end and CPM steels at the other end.
Yeah. Most of the knives I make are around 61 Rockwell. To give it a scope, if you go buy a knife from a store, a really good store, even, they're about 55 Rockwell. It's a big difference in between. So what happens is on the C scale, you have a diamond and it puts 150 kilos onto the diamond, onto your knife, and it measures it's a special angle on the diamond, and it measures how far it goes into the steel with the weight on it.
Until it stops at the 150, yeah. So for those that don't know, the Rockwell scale is a hardness scale based on the indentation hardness of a material. And what you're saying is they use a diamond and a certain amount of weight to measure that.
On the B scale, they use a round ball, a hardened ball, and on the C scale, they use a diamond.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a special shape, and they put 150 kilos on. I've got a Rockwell tester at home from...
Yeah, A is a diamond, B is a ball, C is a spherical diamond, so is D, E. There's all these different scale of hardnesses to measure different materials.
C is a diamond.
Yeah. C is a diamond. B is the hardened ball.
Yeah.
You were talking about.
Yeah.
And they use that on copper alloys, softer metals.
Yeah.
A is a diamond, but that's
so you can layer up a knife and put copper in between the layers. As long as it's not on the cutting edge, it doesn't matter. And you can
so
bond
the
stuff
C scale is to measure steel, hard cast irons, titanium. The A scale is used on cemented carbides and thin steel, shallow case hardened steels.
What's the range of C?
The range of C, major load is 60, that's A. A is the major load of 60, B is 100, and C is 150.
150 goes up.
Yeah. So that's the kilograms.
It's always a balance with, you can make knives harder, but they become brittle like glass. That's the problem. So that's what you pull a knife out of cryo or
there's not much point making a super hard knife, because then if you use it for any sort of any time you try and bend it, it's going to snap, right?
Yeah. That's what the tempering process is. You're sacrificing a few Rockwell, and you're going from a 65 back to a 62, or a 64 back to a 62, and you're gaining toughness. So
the ability to bend and press,
flex. Take. Yeah.
So the opposite's true as well. Like, you don't want a knife that's too soft, because you're forever sharpening it. Doesn't hold an edge. It might be super tough and bendable, but then you suffer edge retention issues, right? Whereas you're constantly sharpening a soft metal.
Yeah.
So you want them.
A lot of factory knives will err on the side of caution and make knives
a little bit softer.
Softer, because it's better for people to resharpen knives than it is for a breaker knife.
Yeah.
So a lot of knives are under 50 Rockwell, even good ones from your local knife shop.
So I guess the process of what we're talking about here with cryo freezing knives and the tempering process and quenching steels is to bring up the toughness, to try and get the most out of the steel that you can before you make it brittle.
The cryo process is because you take it to such a high temp. Same with high carbon steels. If you took it to too high a temp, you'd have to bring it back further. You can't take it back past zero normally with high carbon knives, but with the stainless knives, it's just how they do it.
I was always under the impression, and I could be way wrong here, but I was always under the impression that during the forging process, the idea of heating the steel up is to get all of the steel molecules further apart, making them easier and more malleable.
They do become...
And then freezing them contracts all of them, like a muscle being flexed, contracts all of those molecules back super tight, and that increases the toughness. And then sometimes manufacturers will do a third tempering process to, like what you were saying before, which is to kind of bring that Rockwell back down again, so that the freezing makes it super hard, and then they'll re-temper it maybe
it's relieve tension.
Called a room temper, where they will heat the metal up and then let it cool to room temperature, and that kind of brings that Rockwell back down again to make it still retains the kind of toughness, but then without the brittleness.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, but there's normally 2 tempering cycles on any of the steels. Some of the stainless steels, when I do a batch, I'll do a lower temper and then test it in between. and then adjust the next tempering cycle to according to what I want the steel to be at.
Are you testing for hardness along this process?
Yeah, in between.
Okay. And do you just use like I've seen like a table mounted punch?
No, I've got one from like the early 1900s. I used to be my background is horticulturalist, mechanic, toolmaker, and then I currently work in civil, and this has sort of just been an accumulation of all the skills. Built my own house and stuff like that. It's accumulation of all the skills that I've got. It's design, it's metalwork, it's wood, and that's a plane going overhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's...
Someone's coming back from Bali, so I'm happy for them. Yeah, so the knife making hobby is obviously an accumulation of all the skills you've picked up over the years. Getting back to this the hardness punch from the 1900s. Do you have a lot of old stuff? Do you like using old equipment?
I do. I think there's something beautiful about the older drills, and there's like love in the design. It's not just how quickly can we make this. So there is a few old tools in the workshop.
Do you enjoy the process of using like modern lathes and lasers and other stuff that's kind of geeky and cool as well?
Yeah, I just recently, like I said, bought the induction forge, and I've picked up a fiber laser, a 30-watt fiber laser, so that will engrave logos into hardened steel with like next to no effort. I haven't been putting logos on anything because I don't want to get to the point where I finish a knife and then try and etch a logo on, electro etch one on, and it stuff the knife. So
I've never seen an electro etch come out as clean as a laser etch.
No.
It just more or less can't happen.
Yeah, there are ways of getting past it. You can put nail polish on and then use a little laser to laser
clean up the lines or whatever.
Well, just burn what you want off, and then electro etch that. That's a good way of doing it, but it's a long process, and you can still stuff a knife. So yeah, I've just been collecting tools and equipment, and everything I sort of make goes back into materials and more tools and putting on.
What's
events.
the knife steel you prefer to use the most? Are you still using 1085?
I'll use 1084 and 15N20 and a range of other things, and 80 CRV2 for layered steel.
And for people that don't know, they're all high carbon. That's a high carbon, but is that like a basic tool steel?
Yeah, it's a basic tool steel.
Like what you'd make a hammer or a chisel out of?
No, chisel's probably higher, probably about the same, probably a 1084 sort of. So the 1084 is a 10 series, and then the 84 stands for 0.84% carbon. So 1095, 0.9%. Yeah, 10.
I thought 1095 was used as a spring steel in cars, leaf springs.
No, so spring steels are also high carbon, but they're also other different elements in it to make it more springy. So they're like your SUP 9, your 5160 steels.
Okay. Yep.
Which I also use. So if I make a big chopper, I make a machete, it'll be out of a spring steel. New stock, not recycled stuff.
And the advantage of using a spring steel is because it's got those
More
other elements
impact
added
resistance.
to it, more impact resistance and probably flexibility, or
Yep.
which is what you'd want in a larger knife, right? You don't want it to sort of be brittle because it will just snap off.
And you can
swing it.
still achieve 59 Rockwell
safely with those steels, yeah. So what is 1084, 1085, 1095 used for mainly?
1095.
Yeah.
Your SE knives.
Yeah. But like
That's
they're originally a tool steel, right?
Yeah, it's
like
tool steel.
A workshop steel for making tools.
Yep.
Okay.
So coming from a background of tool making, we would make punch and dies out of K110, which is D2. Lots of that sort of.
What's with the knife industry hate for D2?
It's because a lot of Chinese makers make knives and put D2 on it, and they're potentially not D2, and it gives a bad rep to D2.
But there's nothing really wrong
Also,
with D2.
it's borderline. It's right on the borderline of being a stainless. So
and a carbon, yeah.
yeah. So anything over 14% is considered a stainless, and the D2s can vary for their percentages of.
But they're
of,
just
that's
under.
this is for chromium.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is
The chromium in the steel makes it stainless.
yes.
Yeah.
Not
The
not
amount of
completely true.
chromium.
Not completely true. The new steels with the powdered steel technology, they can form carbides which give it more stain resistance and stuff like that. So
Yeah, we probably should clarify for the listeners that the amount of chromium in steel is what specifies it as a stainless. But then there's now new steels like H1N1, I think it is, or H1. Spyderco make a Salt series and a couple of their like dive or tactical knives. I think it's called H1 or N1. I'm probably going to get murdered for this in the comments.
I think there's like Zefanet or something like that.
Yeah,
it's incredibly
that's a
resistant.
nitrogen-based steel with no chromium or no iron in it.
Yeah. Also,
I don't even know how they make that.
Probably won't
But
hold an edge.
basically, I wouldn't say it's stainless, but it's rust-proof or oxidization-proof steel, which is in the realm of stainless steels. If you're looking for a stain-resistant steel or a
there's always a
like
payoff. So
a rust-resistant steel.
The four things is edge retention, toughness, hardness, and ease of sharpening.
There's also LC200N. It's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like very
stain
salt and stain resistant.
There's always a trade-off. Stain resistance is you're going to trade off for hardness and toughness straight away. You're going to lose edge retention.
Yeah, because it's no iron in it, so it makes it harder to get that edge retention. Again, that's the thing that people are always looking for, is that next big. I remember when I first started getting into the
S35VN.
S30V was like a big deal. Then it went to S35VN, and that was like huge. And all these makers were, saying S35VN's like, they've added vanadium to S30V basically, and now it's like this super steel. And then it went to S90V, and then S110V, and then they came out with LMAX and 20CV and M390, and all of these. The demand for these super powdered steels that were so tightly held together, amazing edge retention, high corrosion resistance. Yeah. The demand was there, and then all of these metal companies, steel producers, were all scrambling to make the next super steel, and now we've landed on MagnaCut, and MagnaCut seems to be the hype steel everyone's talking about at the moment. Yeah,
Dr. Larry Thomas came up with that one, and the new one he's come up with is Apex Ultra, I think it is, and it's a forgeable high
sounds
carbon.
Like an Avengers movie.
Yeah, he is knife steel nerds, so he's called himself a nerd. So yeah, awesome names.
Apex Ultra sounds like something Captain America would have to fight. Talk to me about it. What is it? What makes it different?
It's a extremely high carbon, so I think it's like 1.2% carbon. I'm going to wreck that, but it's quite high, and it's forgeable, and is easily worked. So it's readily available. So they've put it onto the market, and yeah.
Don't worry about getting things wrong, man. No one's listening to this podcast anyway. So the amount of carbon is obviously going to drastically affect the outcome of the steel.
It's yes and no.
Same with the amount of chromium you put in.
You can
right? If you
have
put
a
too
saturated.
much chromium, it's going to be soft as butter. Yeah.
Yeah, you can have saturated,
but super
and
stainless.
then I think they keep saying that 1084. We're going to lose so many people talking shop. But you can have 1084...
Or we're going to gain heaps of knife nerds.
Yeah,
They're like, I can't believe he said that.
at 1084, a 1084 steel is said to be great because at saturation, the carbon will dissolve into that much iron, and it will be completely absorbed 100%. There will be no residual carbon that can't attach to the iron. So that's where you run into problems and stuff like that. So 1095's got a bit more, and you've got to do something with that carbon. So it's not great to have this carbon that hasn't bonded to the iron.
I feel like 1084 as well, it's an easier steel for people to work with.
It's a beginner
You can
steel.
heat it up to where it becomes not magnetized. That's when you know it's at the right temperature.
Yeah.
Then there's a very standard step-by-step process for hardening the
Yep.
steel, working with it. I feel like
No hold
there's
times,
a lot of
not really.
information out there on
Yeah.
1084.
815 degrees for a couple of minutes into canola oil.
Yeah, any sort of oil.
You've
Yeah.
got a hardened blade.
Yep.
Temper that.
Yeah.
It's what I was making for years. I'll still do.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's still a great steel.
it's still great. Yeah.
It's just easy for people to get into knife making using that steel. It's got a very, very basic, easy to work with.
Yeah. Can't mess
sort
it
of
up.
profile.
You can't really mess it up.
No.
No, and that's what it's all about.
Have you
And that's
managed to mess it up along the way?
Not that I'm going
Is
to.
there-
I'm not going to admit it on here. No.
No, that's what we're here for. This is where you lay out all your dirty laundry.
Don't have time for that.
Tell us about when you've messed up. Tell us about when knife making hasn't gone the way
sold
you
a
wanted
knife
it to.
to Harry Boone and he broke it.
That's my fault. I was prying with the knife.
You were log splitting and then you
I was, yeah.
tried to get it out violently.
So I'd betoned it into. I was splitting firewood in the backyard for my chimina. I love chiminas. I think they're the best thing ever.
Yeah, bonfires.
They're
bonfires
basic.
are better.
Yeah, but it's a bonfire that's contained. There's no mess. It
No
heats
mess
up.
either.
It heats up 360 degrees. It's brilliant. They're brilliant and they're cool. Like people come over and they're like, "Oh, that's cool," because not many people have them, right? And I would highly suggest if you want to make a talking point at your next barbecue, light up a chimina. I've got a cast iron one. It's so
I've
cool.
got a brazier, a wood-fired spar at home. So
Okay. All right, yours is bigger. I get it.
Yeah.
So I was chopping firewood in the backyard, and then the knife got stuck, and then I tried to just pry the firewood apart, and then the knife snapped. But that's that's user error.
took a bend before it snapped. So the grain looks
It
good.
did actually take a bend.
Yeah,
so I
so
should have at that point stopped bending
No,
it.
it was already too late. If it took a bend,
Well,
Must
it
have-
didn't bend and then stay there, which means that the tempering process was right. It bent and then came back, and then I bent it again, and that's when it snapped.
yeah.
That's
I
my
think it was
fault.
like 2.5 mil stainless 14C 28N steel.
I really like
Everything's
that
got its
knife.
limitations.
It was actually
It was
beautifully
nice
made.
knife, I know.
Yeah, it was nice. My
to-
fault. I was
Let's
like,
sort you out with something a bit
I
more
was testing its,
boom-proof.
I was testing its durability,
Yeah.
and then I found out just how durable it is.
And now we know.
Now we know.
Thank you for doing the testing at your own
Exactly.
expense.
I did the torture testing at my own
Oh.
expense to find out, but that's not a manufacturer error. That's a Boone error.
Do we skip over? We actually skipped over the whole. We're terrible at this. We
We did
skipped over
skip.
the whole.
How we know each other.
met. Yeah.
How I Met Your Mother.
Harry bought my first knife off me. The very first knife, I was like, put it up, and the wife was like, put this much on it. And I was like, oh, that's too much. And anyway,
What was it, like $40
Don't
or
talk
something,
about it.
including shipping?
Anyway.
I can't remember. It was
Harry was like, yep, I'll take it. And I was like blown away. And that's, I probably started selling knives too early. And this is about 5 years ago. And yeah, so he bought that knife. That was the first knife I ever sold.
To give context, Luke put an ad up on a Facebook group, basically
like,
trying
I
to
made
sell
this
this
thing.
knife, and I just saw this.
He felt sorry for
I
me.
saw this. I saw this thing that this. It was not pretty, but I was like, you know what?
Ouch.
You
I'm
know
sitting
what?
right here. He
You know
can't
what?
look at me now.
Well, look at how far you've come, right? But I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? This guy's battling. I'm gonna buy this knife, and hopefully, this guy will be not deterred. He will go, oh look, I can do this,
Yeah.
and then he will pursue his dreams,
False sense of security.
his potential dreams of getting into the knife making industry. And so I did a good thing, and I at the time was like, you know what? I'll either inspire this guy to keep going, or at least I'll make a friend out of it. And ironically,
Got both.
Both happened. We are now lifelong friends, and
Lovers.
you are shh, don't say that out loud on the podcast. I'll have to edit that out. And and now a knife maker. And to be honest, I could not be more proud to have been part of
Proud
at least
dad moment.
Yeah, the start of that journey for
we
you.
can hug after and you give me a pat on the back.
Yeah, and I see where you've come in your craft now. Like if anyone wants to go to Makesmith on Instagram,
You can see
and
the journey.
see the quality that you're producing now, and at the price point, it's arguably some of the best value for money knives on the market.
Still a luxury item, people. Still a luxury item. Buy bread for your family. You know.
Yeah, get that bread first.
Yeah, get
but
that bread.
but the thing is, if I walk into you know those stores that sell chef's knives, like kitchen stores,
yeah.
right? Like they're in Westfields and stuff. You walk in and
The knife shop. Yeah.
yeah, and you look at some of the crap you can buy for $200 or $300 a knife.
And they're 50 Rockwell or something like that.
Yeah, and they're just cheap
I've
stainless.
tested $300 knives and lasered on patterns to
Yeah.
make you buy it. Yeah, it's not.
But they're cheap. They're cheap stainless knives that are mass produced. Or you could buy, say, what does one of your hunting knives go for? Like around $250, $300?
About $350 now.
$350 now.
$350
okay.
including postage, stainless steel. And you get I've made a lot of friends because you go through the whole process and you get updates and.
Well, I'd say, but I'm probably using an old price scale back when you were probably using more
Also,
elementaries.
COVID happened, so COVID prices.
COVID price, but steel's harder to come by, and also
Steel's jumped 100%.
100%.
100%. It's gone
Since
up. It's
COVID.
doubled.
It's doubled.
It's doubled. So to starting price of a piece of steel, stainless steel, before I even start making a knife out of it, is $60
For the sheet.
just for the piece of steel that I'm going to use off
What?
the bar. So I'm starting with a piece of steel this big, 250
He's holding his hands
mil.
up about 10 inches apart by 2.5 inches wide. Yeah. It's oddly exactly to a
Phallic,
scale that I'm
yeah.
very familiar with.
Yeah,
So that's $60
$60 straight away.
for a piece of steel, arguably the length
30
of a
to
forearm.
60. So you can get like a Nitro V, which would be about $30, or something like CPM.
Nitro V is a bit more of that's a premium
budget
steel,
No,
right?
it's more budget.
Is Nitro V budget now?
Budget now, yeah. Budget.
What?
Nitro V and 14C 28N and D2 and 440C got a bad rep too from Chinese companies, but 440C is actually good steel.
Nothing against China,
No, nothing against China.
Yeah. but stop saying steels are what they aren't. Simple. So
So
but 440C is a very, like nowadays, that's like Oz 8 kind of in that realm of like budget
good
steels,
high
right?
stain resistance.
But then there's
not
some
great
there's
heat
some
retention,
companies
hard
out
to
there like
sharpen.
Buck that do a brilliant heat treat on it and they get the most out of the 440C.
Yeah.
And there's different types of 442. Hey, there's like 440A, 440B, yeah. And same with
I'm
Oz.
guessing the
There's Oz
C-
8, Oz 10.
The C stands for the carbon content. I guess
Right,
it's a
right,
high
right.
carbon 440C carbon.
Or
Or the N
what
normally
does B
stands for
stand for?
nitrogen. I have no idea. Blueberries.
We're just
Maybe
making
it's
it
got
up
blueberries
now.
in it.
Yeah, they put blueberries in it.
Yeah, that's why it's no good for
440 blueberries.
Yeah.
440 blueberries had to perish for you to have this knife.
You can tell the coffee's really kicking in now.
That's not what I put in it. I'm just waiting for him to fall asleep. And then the podcast really
I was playing asleep last night.
No, stop. I'm probably going to get letters for those jokes now.
Oh dear. Yeah, consent.
It was consensual, yeah. It's consensual sleep play. So when you have these hammer-ins and these people come to learn to make knives, what is the process that you walk them through? Do you take them from basic bar stock or a sheet metal, cutting it out?
Multiple demos throughout the day. There's more people there. There's the collective of skill and talent is crazy. It's some of the best knife makers.
And that's just you before we even get to the other people that are there contributing.
Much more talented and skillful people than me attend, and they run demos. Some people run the coal forges for 2 days. There's a guy making hammers and swords for 2 days, just giving demos.
Hammers and swords.
Yeah, very different things, but
Swords are in high demand in today's society.
I believe they're coming back.
They're coming back.
Yeah.
I like swords. I think they're cool.
I built a hammer rack, so I'm collecting hammers and stuff now.
You should try and build a
I'm building a sword
A
forge.
katana, a traditional Japanese fighting sword. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm sending you that
It's
challenge.
literally the reason I got into why we all love knives, isn't it? We're all nerds and we watch manga.
We watch
and,
movies.
yeah,
and
anime, and we want to watch.
You know what got me into knives, honestly, and this is so sad to admit, was the Rambo movies. He'd pull out these fucking things with the compass on them, and man, watching that as a kid, I was like, that's sick. That's what a knife should be. It should be able to start a car for you
I think
make an espresso and tell you where you're going in the bush.
All the manga and anime and stuff that I watched as a kid. My property's sort of changed in the last 4 years, and it's developed into like revolving around the hobby. So there's a huge, for those who don't know and won't look at the Facebook or Instagram, I've got a 350 square metre shed. There's a house in the back of it with, 2-story, 155 square metre house built into the back of it, this big shed. Cars and motorbikes, and then about more than a third of the workshop is set up for knife making. And there's an outdoor forging, about 40 metres away, there's an outdoor forging workshop, and then a insulated box grinding room with 3 grinders in it, or 4 grinders in it now, just to keep the dust away from the motorbikes and stuff like that. So all the forging and stuff happens in the shed, in the big shed, and then the grinding and outdoor forging area is away from the shed. And there's like a tiny home on the block that I built and lived in. I had a friend living with me for 2.5 years, Matt from RMK.
He was making all of his leather from his residence on your property. Yeah. He was producing some really high quality leather goods.
Still is. I've got wallet in my pocket. Mm-hmm. Got the. I don't know if you've seen that. Little
plug for Matt here from RMK Leatherworks. He does some amazing leather stuff.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest, I have always preferred Kydex as a material for knife sheaths. But I did get a Bussy knife years ago in an exchange with an American guy, because Bussy's an American. And I got Matt to do a sheath for it, and then I sold it because the knife didn't have a sheath, and I was like, Kydex just doesn't really suit this knife. It was like a really cool, like a Bowie knife. It needed a leather sheath. Reached out to Matt, and Bussy is very
hard pressed
thick.
to get him to do a custom sheath these days, people. But
definitely
reach out.
Well,
and ask
it wasn't
him to
easy
make one.
even back then when he was less busy. But the Bussy is a hard knife to make a sheath for out of leather, because the stock is very thick on the knife.
Yep. So the welt's got to be thicker.
Yeah, and he had to make quite a thick sheath for it, and then he had to use a specific type of sewing machine, and a lot went into it. But he produced the most beautiful leather sheath I've ever seen for this knife. And when I sold the knife, the guy that bought it said, I would have bought this just for the sheath. Yeah, so he does do very good work.
A lot of the time that Matt will make a sheath for a knife, that was pre-pandemic, and it was when it was a joke, and I got him to put
there's a COVID-19, like a what you would imagine. So this is a wallet that I'm looking at. There's a germ kind of pressed into the outline of a cartoon germ, and it says COVID-19.
Obviously, it wasn't a joke for a lot of people. So
then it says, "Stay home. Please wash off your hands."
For fuck's sake.
And then the Makesmith logo in the wallet. Very funny, and a lot of cash in here for a guy that doesn't sell drugs. The pandemic wasn't a joke, but people thinking that the response to the pandemic was appropriate was a joke.
The level of
the level of hype the common cold got was ridiculous through COVID.
Yeah.
And amazingly, influenza just completely went away for the time of COVID. Almost no stats on influenza. Amazing. Yeah. Maybe we should shut down the entire economy every time there's a bad spicy cough going around. Moving on. The pandemic played a lot of havoc in terms of getting materials into the country, because obviously when there's a respiratory illness traveling around from country to country, especially through trade, and shipping routes, there's a lot of hesitation to bring in things from a particular country out of fear of spreading more pandemic, right?
Or a good
And-
excuse
Yeah. Well,
to raise the price and
yeah. Well, it's hard not to raise prices when materials are more scarce and staff is non-existent, right?
yeah.
And so I can understand why things are more expensive now, but through the pandemic, man, everything got hit. You know, you were talking about the price of steel went up. We couldn't even get steel.
Couldn't even get timber. Yeah.
Timber went through the roof. Everything associated with
Except for our
day-to-day manufacturing was completely
except for our wages went through the roof.
Yeah, I think pre-pandemic I was definitely earning less as a subcontractor. And then post-pandemic I've just noticed that the market has increased. But that's inflation. Like you have to increase rates when inflation increases the cost of living, right?
I live in a rural residential area, so lots of acreage. I'm on 2.5 acres on the side of Mountain Injury. There's a waterfall just off my block. There's walking trails just up the road. Like
Pandemic would have been paradise for you.
I was quite happy. I was still working. I wasn't made to take anything I didn't want to take, and yeah, it wasn't.
Me too,
wasn't,
bro.
It wasn't bad, but I can imagine. I sympathise with people living in cities where you can't go out, where you can't go get coffee or food, and that's the lifestyle, and that's how you socialise. That's everything. I'm quite happy. I'm professional.
My phone's on Do Not Disturb and on silent, so I don't know how I'm getting a phone call.
Answer it. He's live. So
Yeah,
it wasn't. It would have been hard for people that densely populated areas and.
Well, one thing I didn't understand was how the vaccine permitted you to go and socialise, right? So I couldn't go to the pub until unless I was double vaxxed. And people were checking the vaccine passports on your phone, your certificate, right? And they would scan it at the front door and make sure you were double vaxxed. And everyone had a fake one, right? Like, let's just put it out there. I had one. Heaps of people faked them. It was so easy to get a fake one. But why? I don't understand why it was a condition of entry to be double vaxxed when the whole point of the marketing surrounding why you would get the vaccine would be to protect yourself, right? So why would it matter if you went into a room full of unvaccinated people? If you've been vaccinated and the idea is now you're protected and you're going to get less symptoms, why does it now matter who you associate with? And then people would say, it would prevent the spread. Well, scientifically that didn't happen. There's no data to support the fact that it
none
prevented
before
the
and
spread.
there's none after.
Yeah, same with the masks. At what point do we as a society just come to grips with the fact and admit to each other that
Too
the
much
pandemic,
pride. I don't think some people
the
will ever.
pandemic was a failure?
No,
the way we handled it, the advice that we gave each other, the stuff that we got from the news, so-called professional health experts. When are we just going to admit that was a failure?
People have too much pride and they still think they've done it for the right reasons, I think.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
I'm
okay. Like, I've got lots of friends that didn't have to get it and went and got it, and I respect their decision. If I had a friend that wanted to get it and couldn't get to a doctor's and wanted me to drive them, I'd probably drive someone there because the placebo effect of it might help them mentally. I don't know. But I would just encourage people to do their own research. A lot of things weren't adding up. So I was
the people most at risk of the pandemic were the immunocompromised and the elderly. So why were we isolating young, healthy people?
Wasn't the average death rate
65 and
65, which is over the average death rate.
And the average death rate was like 0.03% amongst that community.
I've got scrapbooks of
The
so many
data,
screenshots, and it's just.
But I was so over the nightly news.
Yeah.
constantly giving us the death toll of the week or the day or whatever, or how many cases.
I think
Nobody gave a fuck.
Italy went from like official number was like 77,000 to the actual number of deaths from COVID was like 7,000. Went from 77 to about 7,000.
Italy has a rapidly aging
population.
Yeah. The average person smokes over there. Like they're not as adverse to cigarettes as we are here. And
given context,
it's a different lifestyle. So
I've got a needle phobia too. Paranoid of needles. I had a tree fall on me on my block.
Jesus, you okay?
I broke my leg and I cut a tree and it flipped over a power line and then landed on me from 6 meters up.
Oh.
So
I was wondering what it was that happened.
I threw the chainsaw as I saw it. I'm like, oh, don't get hung
really?
up. I threw the chainsaw in front of me and the tip was still spinning, the bar was still spinning, and a tip dug into the ground and then spun around and hit me in the side of the head as I dived out of the way. So I copped this and then I copped the tree on my leg and
the body of the chainsaw or the chain?
No, the chain spinning hit me in the side of the head. So it missed my neck. The tree missed my neck and my back. So I wasn't beginning of this year. I wasn't walking for about 3 months.
You're lucky that chain didn't rip your fucking face off.
I've got a nice big scar. So she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna give you some painkillers." I'm like, she's like, "We're gonna give you intravenous painkillers." I'm like, "Hey, can we just start with like endone or something else before that?" And she's like, "You're in a lot of pain." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I don't want a needle."
People have come at me in the media for not getting the needle, for not getting the vaccine. But I can't be vaccinated because me and all of my family have really severe adverse reactions to vaccinations. So
breakout heart conditions?
Breaking heart conditions, yeah. No, I remember I had a really, really bad adverse reaction to the tetanus injection when I was in school.
It's not just tetanus anymore either.
It was
things together.
Yeah, it's a few things together.
A tree fell on me. They tried to give me a tetanus, and I'm like, a tree fell on me. She's like, yeah, but we'll give you tetanus. I'm like, a tree fell on me.
But there's this wide misconception that tetanus can be involved with rusty metal when really
it's in the dirt.
Tetanus isn't a bacteria. It's in soil or feces. Yeah. Anyway, that's another thing the medical industry is just getting so wrong.
Yeah. I've got the needle phobia. Mum's an anti-vaxxer. she went to rallies. I didn't, but
both my brothers have had adverse reactions as well.
Really?
Yeah. So it just runs in our family. And then people have come at me for being anti-vax. I'm not. I'd love to have if there was a vaccine that was safe for me to take, I'd love to take it. I'd love to take it. I'm not anti-vax. I'm anti-unsafe vaccines for everyone. That's what I'm anti.
It's still not approved yet, is it? The vaccine?
It's the largest clinical test of all time, this mRNA vaccines. The technology has been around for a long time, but we've never mass produced it and mass tested it on people.
Pull it out, yeah.
And now there's all these jokes about unvaccinated sperm being worth so much a gallon. It's pretty funny.
Hilarious.
Yeah. So I'm at a premium now. My seed is at a premium thanks to the pandemic.
That sock under your bed?
Yeah, worth millions.
Microwave that shit. Wring it out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Dear.
I do. That's how I get it to body temperature. Microwaving it. Let's get back on knives before this podcast gets cancelled for misinformation spreading. So, where to now? Where is the knife going for you now? Now that you're at a stage where you're producing these high quality blades.
Yeah, I'm doing.
What are you working on now?
Sydney Knife Show. I'm doing just trying to level up. I'm always afraid of plateauing and just accepting that what I'm doing is the best that I can do. I do Sydney Knife Show, I do Brisbane Knife Show, I run the Hammer In, which is the largest private knife making event of its kind in Australia, which is really cool. And it's not because of me, the property is beautiful, it's set up well for what we do, and it's the people that make it such a great event. Like, it's just such a wealth of knowledge from beginners to experts. We've had mastersmiths there. It's been incredible. Very lucky to be part of it and to be running it. I've just put it out that I'm probably going to go to America next year, do Blade. So I'll go to Atlanta.
Blade Show,
the biggest knife show in the world.
Will you be debuting your products at the show, or are you going as a visitor?
I'm going to try and get a table. Yeah.
You're going to the States?
I'm putting that out there. I'm putting that out there. Yeah. So it's about $6,000 worth of expenses to get over there and back, and accommodation and flights, and booking a table is about $1,000 Australian, I believe. So
you make 1 or 2 knives out of Magna Cut, and that's it, paid for. That's the trip paid for.
That's the difference. Like the same thing. Like when you start with a $30 bar of steel or a $60 bar of steel, and you use $30 worth of abrasives, you use $25 worth of, or $50 worth of handle material. You use $30 worth of Kydex. You put all that time and effort in, and you can still only sell the knife for about $350. It doesn't matter if it's out of Nitro V or Magna Cut. It's about
you're actually
money.
getting.
You can't
sell
add
it.
the extra money on.
Yeah, and then it just affects your margin as a knife maker, right? Yeah. So it's almost like
the market might sell more. You might.
Yeah, exactly.
It might be more likely
to be higher in demand.
Yeah, but it won't. You can't add that price on, and it's better to be in someone else's hands being used than sitting in a drawer at my place. So the prices are, as reasonable as I can make them. But
I think you're producing arguably some of the best value for money knives on the market.
It's a balancing act between making them look handmade and also factory. They look too factory at the moment. I don't know how to balance it out, but
the handmade always comes with imperfections. Like imperfections is what makes something look handmade. It's a little tattered, a little rough around the edges.
But we're striving for perfection. So
so that's the balance, isn't it?
Had people come up to shows and be like, "Oh, I'll take that one, but I'll take an unboxed one." I'm like, "That's I made that. That's the only one of its kind existence." And they're like, "Oh, okay, shit."
How are you? So, for those that don't know, Luke brought out a roll of knives last night that I was looking at, and that we're now talking about today. And in the process of looking through the knives that he brought, there was a couple of options where you have now moved into Cerakoting a knife.
I've got. Well, there's the option of it now. There's a friend.
Talk us through what Cerakoting is and how you offer that as a finish.
So on a high carbon knife is highly acceptable. It will rust in humid weather. That's the problem. Great knives, great steel, very tough, easy to sharpen, but will rust when it's humid even. So Cerakoting is a ceramic type coating, and it's put on like powder coat without electricity. So it's just spray painted on and then baked. And it's baked at a lower temperature so it won't affect the tempering on the knife, so it won't soften the steel more, where I think powder coat's done at like 400 degrees, where Cerakoting's done at about 130, which is well below what a tempering cycle is. So It won't soften the steel anymore. And it just protects the steel and gives a really durable finish on a knife.
So any finish that's super durable that can be baked on at a lower temperature is going to be advantageous to a knife maker.
Yeah, you can do it at home, but it's a big process, and it's sandblasting, it's acetone, and a process.
Sending it to a place is obviously a lot. Do you set it there and then bolt the handles on when you get it back?
Yeah, so I've got to finish the knife, have all the handle finished, and then deassemble it with removable scales, and then reassemble it when I get it back, because I can't sand anything afterwards. It's the finished product. And
you can't re-sand it once you get the knife back either. So if there's anything that's left out of the finishing process, it's done. It's too late.
That's it. Yeah. I am moving away from high carbon and making my own layered steel and into stainless. So I think I've got about $5,000 worth of Magna Cut sitting at home with all the few other CPM steels. CPM 154 is probably my favorite. That's the direction I'm going in. Trying to level up. I bought, steering away from I do all my own sheaths. I do my own wood stabilizing. I've got the laser etcher so I can etch my own logo. I've got a $4,000 cowboy sewing machine, so I make my own leather, which looks
Yeah,
pretty good.
I saw I love the suede finish on the sheets. I think that's really interesting and cool, and not something I've really seen, especially from like in Matt's work. It's like the polished outside of the sheets, or like
That's his style.
That's his style, yeah. Whereas yours is a bit more
the textures he uses.
Yeah.
And
whereas yours looks kind of like
he's got
almost
bulky-
like a set of work boots, like that finish of that suedey sort of finish.
Yeah.
I found it much more.
What do they call that? Storm. That one was called Storm.
The color,
Yeah.
the color and the suede, yeah, really nice, and gives it more of a almost like a pre-worn, pre-broken in look to it. I really liked
It's like
it.
the same with the stonewash finish on all the knives. You can use the knife for a considerable amount of time before it actually starts to show any wear on the actual
Well,
knife.
if anything, you're going to add to the stonewash finish.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know, there's really three main types of finishes on a knife on the market. Three main ones. There's obviously millions of finishes, but the three main ones would be a polished finish, a stonewash finish, and a powder coated or
a
DLC coat or whatever, to a knife. And the stonewash is the process where they will get an almost finished knife, and they'll put it through a tumbling process where aggregate and abrasives are added. And what it does is it puts like millions of little scratches and imperfections onto the finish of the knife. And then what you're left with is actually quite a pretty sort of like dulling of the steel.
Uniform finish is what you're going for.
But it's like a working finish.
Yeah.
The stonewash is like a working finish, whereas a high polished finish is obviously once you start using it, it's going to show up any little scratch or any little nick
Same
or
with
burr
anything
you put in the
coated.
steel.
We'll mark straight away.
And then we get into the coatings, which is like some coatings are super wear resistant. Like
There's a few other ones. The diamond coating, is it?
I think it's DLC.
Yeah.
DLC coated.
Something like that.
Yeah, where it's the coating I've seen on ZT knives, I cannot get it to wear off. It's really, really well done. And then my Essie knives that are bushcrafting knives, it's almost like a 2-pack car paint. It just comes straight off once you start using it. But then, you get what you pay for, right? Like a cheaper finish, it's going to wear off quicker, and then you've got to maintain the carbon steel underneath if that's what it is. And then if you're paying like $400, $500 for a pocket knife, you want it to be as wear resistant and rust resistant because it's in your sweaty pocket all day long.
Yeah.
So you need those higher end finishes on
a
those.
lot of the pocket knives, which I wouldn't mind getting into, I've got stuff that's already prototyped and heat treated and sitting there waiting for me to have some time.
Are you trying to get me to buy your first pocket knife as well?
I'll probably have to give you one. But
the blade would be in the shape of a phallus, I imagine, if you were going to give me.
No, it's not. Sorry to disappoint you. We'll have to talk customs after. If that's something you're into,
Yeah.
But the steel used in pocket knives is sort of a different steel. Arguably, some people will say you can have you don't make a big camp chopper out of M390. It's M390 is reserved for pocket knives and stuff like that, like high-end pocket knives. It's just you can, but it's almost a waste.
It's a waste of that stock, right? Because you wouldn't want to pay the amount of money to get a big bar of M390. Yeah, you wouldn't want to pay it for something you're going to thrash. Whereas a pocket knife, you want that edge retention that M390 offers. You want that corrosion resistance to your body sweat that M390 offers. You wouldn't want those. You actually probably wouldn't want those values in even like a competition chopper. That's why a lot of the competition choppers that I've seen on the market, which is a new sport that's growing now, where people will take a knife that they've made, which is basically like a shorter machete style, they're quite a rectangular shape, maybe a 10 or 11 inch knife blade length with a handle on the end, and they'll go through like a series of tests where they'll chop rope, chop water bottles, chop timber, and then at the end it's like, how sharp is the knife?
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of those knives made out of 3V, and 3V seems to be kind of like at the moment the be all and do all of hard use steels.
Is it CPM 3V?
I think they have gone to CPM 3V now. Yeah.
I lose track because it seems like there's always a new one.
Well, there's, to explain to people that don't know, there's like D2, D2 was a steel that was used to punch out pressed metal in like World War II. Basically, that's when it was like used a lot. It was basically the steel that had, they'd say you were cutting out a box out of sheet metal. The D2 would be in the shape of what you wanted to cut out in the press. And it would be sharp, and D2, to its credit, would maintain that sharpness for a long period of time. But obviously that comes into like the way they heat treated the steel to make sure it was like super hard wearing, but then it would have been brittle, right? If you hit it with a hammer, it probably would have chipped. So there's trade-offs to all steel, but D2 was basically used to press out or cut into steel in factory environments in and around the era of World War II. And then D2 was also used later on to make hunting knives and that sort of stuff, because like Luke was saying earlier, it's very close to a stainless steel, but with all of the hard use properties of a carbon steel. And then recently, in recent years, they've brought out CPM D2, which is a powdered version of D2. And now there's, all of these super steels where people have worked out they can inject or powdered in other alloys into the steel making process to get these ridiculously hard use, more corrosion resistant than an average carbon steel. Steels used for high end or hard use knife use. And then 3V was brought out as like a very pinnacle hard use knife tool steel. And now they have brought out CPM 3V, which is basically 3V on steroids. Same with D2. CPM D2 seems to be D2 on steroids. People are going to be like, oh, he wants to talk about his steroids. I'm going to get letters. I don't know how.
It's all natural.
I don't know how they inject the gear into the D2 and the 3V, but that's a process for these, high-end steel producers. They don't exactly tell the public how they do it, what their recipes are or how they do it. That's kind of a pretty closely guarded secret, right?
I would imagine so.
But once you see CPM in front of a steel, you can assume that it's been beefed up from its standard template.
There's a lot of different steels that also from different manufacturers that will be almost the same alloy content, but be called different thing from different producer. So you get Nitro V is very close to 14C28N, two different producers. K110 is D2, same alloy content. Just different companies called different things, different names, obviously. There's lots of crossovers and equivalents in knife making. Yeah, but that's about...
Well, ironically, CPM 3V, it's really quite close an alloy to D2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but then all these knife nerds are going to be like, no, it's not, it's this, it's that, it's got this in it. Like, no, there's not huge jumps in terms of...
alloy
there's they don't have to do much to get a completely different steel out of just adding a little bit here or there.
That's like talking about, like going back to high carbon steels, where they could talk about W2, and W2 is a loosely used term for, it could be, quite different from batch to batch even from the same mill. So yeah, you get all sorts of varieties with steel, but there's still something fun about layering up your own steel in high carbon, and there's something really enjoyable about the clean process of stainless steel and not having to worry about it sitting on the shelf, and having some knives ready to be ground and have handles put on them for customers when they want that profile is really handy. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm the leaps and bounds I've made in the last year. I'd be really interested to see where I'm at in another year.
Me too.
America next year, crazy.
I think for an Australian knife maker to go over to the States and debut their products, it's definitely going to open you up to a whole new market of purchasers.
It's very
But then with
competitive
that's
over
going to
there.
come the pressure on being able to produce, because it's a much larger market. It's hundreds of times the size of our buyers market here for these products. So really, I mean, if you're going to make the leap, you've got to make the leap in terms of being able to produce as well. And then it's a tough position to be in, because in America, they're going to have the buying power when it comes to actually getting materials in at a certain cost. In
And
Australia,
producing it. Most mills are
in Australia, it's going to be much harder to get your hands on the products, turn them into a knife, and then ship them to America for a competitive rate. So it's almost like the Australian produced items are always going to come with a slight premium over American locally produced items.
I think I've sent knives to America a few places, mainly Texas, believe it or not.
Yeah, they love knives and guns in Texas.
And big hats.
Yeah. Still the Wild West there.
Yeah, Final Frontier. Be cool. I've got a few friends.
Well, they share a border with Mexico, and it's very, from what I've seen in their media, it's very like, there's a lot of, I'm not even going to touch it. Yeah, I'm not even going to go there. It's not for me.
And it's very political at the moment too.
Very
with
political,
the
yeah.
upcoming election and.
Yeah. But let's just say they love their knives and guns.
Yeah.
And their freedoms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good
Democracy. I like a nice cup of coffee and democracy in the morning.
Who doesn't like? Where was I? On the way down here, that wad of cash is going past a gun shop. On the way down, one of the biggest gun shops in Australia, and I don't hunt, but I target shoot. But the owner wanted a knife rehandled, and while I went down there, I dropped that back, and 2 more of my knives got sold.
Nice.
From other people in the store bought knives.
Nice.
While I was going through, and that paid for this trip, which is cool. On the way to Everleigh Works in middle of Sydney, there's an old historical train building yard. I've never been there, always wanted to. It's run by a friend of mine, Matt Mewburn, who's a absolute gem of a human being. So I'm going to go annoy the shit out of him today. And then hopefully not too much, because I've got to stay at his house.
Is he
tonight.
going to forge something with you while you're there?
I think he's running a business, and there's like.
Okay. So you just want to see how his business is run?
Yeah, I'm just going to go in and take photos and see if I can fly the drone around his workshop. And
I'm sure he'll be down for that.
I'm also the reason I'm down in Sydney is because beginning of this year I broke my leg, had a crush injury, still recovering from compartment syndrome in my calf muscle. Calf muscle's not responding to electrical signals completely. I've got like 50% sort of contraction in the muscle at the moment. Like it's only my leg. Was on crutches, only just being able to go up and down stairs sort of comfortably. I had the hammer in 2 weeks ago. I had 92 people at my place on the Saturday. I had 54 people staying the night camping, bonfire, barbecue, everything. So I put on food and whatnot. And the place is just open. Like all the tools are just free range. It's really cool. I'm about to put up some photos and edit them from the weekend. But I was being a larrikin, and I was on an electric scooter in the dark, and I just went around the block once, and I was like showing off in front of a pretty girl, obviously. And I came off it and just ate shit in loose gravel, and I was like, oh, I think I've hurt myself. And I walked back in, and I had a lie down and went back to the party, and I was like, just said my goodbyes for the night. And then about 3 a.m. in the morning, I got up, and I'm like, I'm in so much pain, and I just wanted to know because I had a whole nother day of giving demos and being a host at my property with another 90 people coming, and the 54 that were... Anyway, I drove myself to hospital at 3 a.m. in the morning and got 3 sets of x-rays, and they were like, oh, you've torn your collarbone off your scapula. So I've got an AC dislocation. So that was 2 weeks ago, and it's a lot better, but I can't lift my arm above my shoulder. I can't do anything. Can't ride my motorbike.
Couldn't fight me off last night.
Couldn't fight you off. So I've had time off work, so I've come down to Sydney to hang out with a couple of people that I never have time for. So this is a break for me.
It's tough living so far apart, isn't it?
Oh.
Like if I want to duck down the road and
Well, Harry's been to my place.
buy a bushcraft knife, I can't do that. I've got to book a flight to Noosa. But I think the thing that I found most impressive when I visited your property was just not only the space
How small
and the
the people were
location.
living on the property. All the short people.
Yeah, like visiting. Where do the hobbits live? I don't remember. You're not that short, mate. It's not even a good joke.
Yeah, have you seen how hairy my feet are?
What I found most impressive was the location's stunning.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. With
mountain, really
we're up on the
amazing.
shoulder of Mount Indrae, and there's like the rocky outcrop of I'm guessing an extinct volcano core. Hundreds of meters away that lights up golden in the afternoons, and waterfalls and big fire pits. And I've gone super eccentric on the block with an excavator and dug all these like massive camping pads into the side because it's on a bit of a slope. So to make the ground more usable, I've dug all these like lily pads going down the hill. So it's like camping pads. So it's a space to enjoy the view and hang out.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Very, very scenic.
Yeah,
Lots of
serenity. I'm very lucky to have it.
But the warehouse, when I walked into where you actually produce these knives, just the vastness of it for a guy doing it out of his backyard, it was like walking into a professional workshop.
To
there was
start
lathes and lasers and cutting machines, and then even like you were talking about before, your grinding room. That's like a professional workshop to produce. And you were at the time cutting out or grinding a lot of knives for an Australian knife maker, like a bulk order.
Yep.
And you were just like, you had a system where you were just zip, 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 done on a knife. And I was really impressed by all the guides that were set up in order to just get that ease of sharpening. It's almost like it was autonomous. You were just a robot just doing each knife.
Yeah,
and
mind-numbing. But
I was impressed by that because it was like, you need to have a setup like that to be able to produce the quantity of knives that you were producing.
Yeah.
And the quality needed to be at a factory finish. And I was also impressed that a lot of these knives were already Cerakoted, so you couldn't scratch them in the process of actually doing what you need to do to get them ready for shipping.
And daggers and getting the tips, all the edges, like four facets to line up on the edge, on the tip.
So for people that weren't there, the sanding machines all had guides. So like a big belt sander, imagine a big belt sander with a guide on it, and then all of the guides had like this fluffy material so that you wouldn't damage the Cerakote when you were like sliding them through the guides.
No, this was, I had
it was something so that when you slid the knife across the sander, it wasn't sliding it on metal for the to protect the Cerakote.
I clamped them, and then it's got like the bar underneath, and then the clamp that runs on the bar. So there's the initial clamp, and that's about all you've got. And I just put a bit of tape, and then peel the tape off afterwards on the knife where I clamp it.
On each knife.
Yeah, and I've got two grinders going in a room with different grits, so I just go, and they're both set up with exactly the same angle, and I can just go from one to both sides, and then do the other grit, and then flip the knife over and do the other side. And I had hundreds of those to do.
So one was to put an edge on, and the other one was to find the edge?
Yeah, just the grit pattern. So I don't know which ones they were, but some of them were A2 and some of them were D2, and they were all Cerakoted. But they're about what I call a basic edge. So it's like a 400 grit finish. It'll shave arm hair, and it's sharp at 400 grit. That's all I sort of put on most of my knives.
You can do a hair popping edge with 100 grit if it's the same bevel.
Yeah, you get a burr, remove the burr, you got a sharp knife.
Yeah, that's exactly. Which did you find got sharper out of the A2 and D2, or sharper easier?
A2 appears to be sharper, easier sharper. D2 is a pig to sharpen, and it uses, I'd say maybe 4 to 6 times as much abrasive material. So you go through belts 4 to 6 times quicker.
Be interesting to do a test on the two steels and see which one retains that edge once it's sharp for longer.
A2.
I think it's a superior steel.
In that, for what they were and for what the edge I was putting on. So edge geometry and everything comes into it too.
I've had a couple of knives in A2 and AEBL.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's a stainless.
Which was similar in performance, and yeah, I found A2.
A2's a high carbon.
Yeah,
and
but
then
I've got an axe. I've got an axe that's in A2.
ABL is a stainless. It's like a
but I
budget
found
one.
like sharpening them was similar,
Really?
and how long they'd stay sharp for. Yeah.
Okay.
The worst I've found is for sharpening is 20 CV. Like that is
Trying to get an edge on it.
Yeah, trying to get a nice clean edge on 20 CV
D2.
takes a
I hate
long time.
Hate grinding D2. There's other more wear resistant steels out there that are diabolical to even put ceramic belts onto at high speeds. That just skates on it. Just doesn't want to remove material. It's crazy. I haven't used them, but yeah, I'm building the repertoire of what I've got on the shelf.
I was told that 20 CV was like the competitor to M390.
Yeah,
Very similar in terms of, but M390 is actually easier to sharpen.
I believe so.
Yeah, I don't know. Once you start going to those ridiculously high grade steels, you need better equipment to be able to sharpen. And then you might have spent $400 on the pocket knife, but now you've got to spend over $1,000 on sharpening the fucking thing. It's a very expensive hobby. Kind of like watches. Whatever you get into.
Nice things, yeah. Nice pens, like the
Once you start getting
it's like
into
jewelry for men, isn't it? A nice watch, a nice wallet, a nice handmade pen.
Well, the thing is, I didn't really get into. I don't need a nice pen. I need a builder's pencil. I don't really need a nice pen to carry around in. But they are fun. They're nice to have, especially if you're in a job where you are writing in front of people or offering a pen even. It's nice to be able to offer. And the back in the day, I remember like Mont Blanc pens were that was like the flex if you pulled out a Mont Blanc pen. Nowadays, Mont Blanc's like cheap compared to what you can spend on an EDC everyday carry pen. I've seen like some Makuti, I think it's called, or Timascus type.
Yeah.
Just the end of a pen can go for $1,000.
Yeah.
Just a little thing that you screw into the end of a pen.
Yeah.
Just as like a little pop to
I've got a fair
titanium
few
pen.
bolt action handmade pens from Shane Mig.
Oh, Mig, yeah. He does nice stuff.
Does good stuff. Australian guy making stuff. I think he's got a range of handmade stuff and a range of what he calls the +61, which is made overseas but to his specs. So I've got a few of each. Affordable. Supporting locals that make, that's what it's all about.
He does a lot of exotic stuff too, like in copper and brass. And
I've got a copper one in the car.
Yeah, people like the added weight of those
and
softer
patinas,
metals.
it changes
and
over
changes
time.
The colour, The more you use it, I find the more it patinas with the oils from your hands, and they're very,
Tells
very
a story.
interesting.
Just like some high carbon knives, like people like high carbon kitchen knives for the fact that they continuously build up this patina, which is semi-rust resistant. It adds a layer of protection. So you get it from cutting onions and lemons and stuff like that. Even potatoes will stain a high carbon knife straight away.
Let's talk about that. So, and we touched on etching before, and now we're talking about patinas, which are very similar processes for protecting the outside of a high carbon knife.
Yeah, it's an acidic process.
And you were talking about when you layer, right back at the start of the podcast, when you were talking about layering different types of metals.
Oh, we're tying it all up nicely. This is good.
Yeah.
Bringing it home.
It's called having good callback or recall.
I got none of that. It's just fishbowl here. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's just something I've picked up from all my time in the media. People don't get my sarcasm over the podcast either. Like, they're going to think like, this guy's a fucking idiot.
Yeah. It's a lot of tongue
which
in
is
cheek.
true, but I'm a sarcastic. Anyway. So when you are layering the metal, you were talking about etching, the process of etching, which darkens or dulls the color of high carbon steels, and then the more stainless steels will stay bright and shiny in the finishing process of the sanding process. And so then you get the layering effect of different colored metals.
You get the contrast.
What are you using to etch those metals?
Ferric chloride will etch, and then for contrast, if you wanted like a almost textile, you can actually feel the pattern. Ferric chloride, multiple passes, steel wool, multiple cycles in the ferric, and then 12 to 24 hours in very strong instant coffee to get a contrast.
For people that don't know, there's different types of chloride-based acids. There's like hydrochloric.
This is ferric chloride,
yeah,
yeah.
ferric
Hydrochloric you use for stainless steels.
Okay.
But
For etching stainless steels.
Yeah. I've got a blend that I use for stainless steels, and then I've got a strong and a weak of ferric for high carbon.
I found that ferric chloride instantly grayed or dulled high carbon steels.
To
It
the point where
didn't
you get
work on
black.
stainless steels. Yeah, you can turn them black if you
Yeah.
leave it in there long enough. Yeah, yeah. Which is based. So,
But it'll still
what is the
wear
process of if you dip high carbon steel into
you have to neutralise
ferric
it.
chloride? What is the process of turning? Is it oxidization that turns the outer skin of the steel black?
I don't know.
We're going to have to look this up.
So, and then, while Harry Googles, you neutralize it in alkaline. So you go from an acidic to an alkaline. So most people use Windex because it's got high ammonia, or you can use cloudy ammonia and water it down and neutralize the acid, or it just keeps eating into the steel. But that's the process. Same with stone washing. Even all the stainlesses get acid etched, and then they go into stone washing to give a bit more of a contrast. If you just stone wash it without acid etching, it won't give a contrast to the uniform scratches you're putting in it. But that's the direction, trying to go in, make affordable knives and a good quality item, and keep the community and get other people interested in it, and change the public perception about knife making.
Google's no help, but I think it is the process of oxidizing
It's an oxidizer.
steel. Yeah.
Sounds good.
And so the process when you have layered steels, what's going to happen is you're going to darken the high carbon steels, and then the stainless steels are going to still remain bright because they're resistant, corrosion resistant to the etching process or the oxidization process. So
More
that's how
resistant,
you get
yeah.
that's how you get the color 1, color 2, or
Yeah.
like that.
So
The
it-
lighter and darker mixes of steels, and that's what creates that
Different
pattern
alloys,
visually. Yeah.
alternating alloys together will give you a. So
And what we were talking about earlier was then if you and etching and patinas kind of go hand in hand. Patina is more of a discoloring or they're quite a pretty.
you
I would say
you can
they're-
force patinas. You
you
can
can
force
force
with
a patina.
mustard.
Yeah, you would same as an etch, right? You can force an etch, but what I'm saying is like a patina is like the process by which you are forcing the steel to oxidize, and you can do that with a number of different processes. With carbon steels, you can do it with ferric chloride, but you can also do it with like what we were talking about before with vegetable matter, or mustard. Anything that's acidic will eat into the outside of that high carbon steel. We call it a patina. It's basically like forced rust, but the difference between etching or a patina is it actually protects the metal from rust, whereas rust is corrosion. A patina is like oxidization. It's like a different process.
Yeah.
And the oxidizing process kind of protects the steel in like what would you call it? It's like almost like the oxidized steel is now protecting it from rusting, whereas if it wasn't patinaed or etched, it would be more susceptible to rust.
It's definitely more acceptable to rust without the patina or without acid etch on it. I'm not sure for what reason. Couldn't give you a good. Even the surface finish on a knife, if you've got a lower grit finish, it's more prone to rust than a high grit finish. So a more polished blade will be more stain resistant than like a mirror polished one is more stain resistant than one that's finished at 120 grit. That's another factor you got to.
Is that because at 120 grit you've got more
Surface area and
like cuts in the surface?
Or you've got maybe surface tension and you've got peaks and valleys and
so more spots for that rust to sit in.
More spots to actually I don't know how it really works, but to start oxidizing those thinner points.
I think you're right. You nailed it with the surface area, right? Like peaks and valleys is more surface area than a flat surface. Yeah. So I think that there's more opportunity for the water vapor to sit in one of those valleys and start the rust process.
A lot of high-end chefs will still use high carbon knives in restaurants because they're
Ease of sharpening.
Ease of sharpening, better retention, tough, and beautiful too. So they build up that patina, and they're using them that much that they don't get a chance to rust. They just get used every day, day in, day out. So patina builds up. There's no risk of them being in a dishwasher or a sink,
Because
for
they're hand
days.
washed, they're meticulously taken care of, and then potentially, wiped down with a bit of oil at the end of each day.
Potentially.
Yeah, so that they're ready, sharpened, and then ready for the next day's.
Yep, quick strop and
quick strop and away you go.
Workhorse.
I still see though that the high-end Japanese manufacturers for kitchen knives will still use layered stainless and carbon steels. And I've always been curious as you sharpen those knives back, and you then get to a layer of stainless, does it become dull?
Because
quicker?
the core is always going to be centered.
So you're saying that there's a core, and then the outside of that core is the layered.
Yeah, normally a lot of the higher end Japanese knives are, well, not all of them, but some of them are stainless steel over soft jacket, so unhardenable stainless steel over the top of like a white paper or a blue 2 core, like a Japanese steel. And then because it's quite, the geometry is so thin and the steel's so hard, it's chippy. So they're like high-end kitchen knives. But then you've got the soft jacket on the outside that takes the flex.
Yeah. So they work hand in hand, the two steels.
Which is the Sanmai technique. So you get this softer outer jacket, you get the stain resistance, in this case, of stainless on predominantly the whole blade, and you've got the edge core is revealed, and it's only a couple of mil at the edge, or maybe about 10 mil is exposed of the high carbon. So it's less maintenance.
You've made a few knives using the Sanmai method now.
Yeah.
And I've seen
probably
beautiful patterns in the steel. And the difference between like a traditional Damascus type pattern where you've got hundreds of layers of different steels mixed together, the Sanmai method, you kind of get this cool like
linear,
almost like a heartbeat that runs down the center of the knife. It's actually quite aesthetically pretty.
It's funny because everybody likes the heartbeat sort of pattern, and that's due to at the time I was using smaller dies and drawing it out slower because I had a smaller press. Now I've got a bigger press, I can go to bigger dies, put more pressure on it earlier, and then go straight to a rolling mill, which gives me a very linear pattern, which is what I wanted. And everyone quite likes the heart rate monitor looking pattern. So it's kind of funny that I was trying to achieve something that people weren't wanting.
Yeah, but that's the whole point of you're producing your own art. It's always going to be what you find interesting, and then if there's a market there for that, then great. But I don't get the impression that you produce these things for other people. I know you sell them, but really I think it's all things that you would use or you find useful, and then
ideally
the market is there for it.
Yeah, ideally I will in the future try not to take orders because it takes the fun out of it. It stresses me because I've got to meet this person's expectation of what they've ordered. I still do it, and it makes me a better maker and pushes challenges me and pushes me to be better. But ideally in the future I make things that I want to make that interest me and try different things and sell as I make. Or I take a batch to Sydney Knife Show in middle of August.
Yeah, I'll be attending that.
Good. There'll be it wasn't last year, but the year before that, I felt bad and gave you a knife or something. Was that 2019?
Yeah, it was before COVID. You gave me
So I came back from that.
You gave me a finished version of the very first knife I bought off you.
A handled, which I just saw in this kitchen drawer earlier today or last night. And yeah, it's horrific, so we're going to have to rectify that.
I love it. I don't want you to touch it.
I'm not going to touch it.
Oh, it's one of my treasured items.
But I'm going to upgrade. Anyway,
it's a symbol of our friendship, undying bromance.
I came back from that city knife show to an empty house too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that weekend?
I think it was like the best weekend and worst weekend of my life.
Oh, no.
So that was like, I've met all these amazing people, and it's my first knife show, and I'm so excited, and
Can't wait to tell you about
I
it.
can't wait to tell you about it. And I got home to an empty house.
Well, the dogs were there, right?
We had his and hers dogs. So she had her dog, and I had, we had puppies, and like adults, we kept 4 of the puppies because that's what adults, So we had 6 dogs, and it got reduced down came home to 3 dogs.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, a bit of a shock. Yeah, but
Well, I bet she's regretting that now.
no, I wish her all the best. It's all good.
Well, if she needs to cut something, she's going to be in need of a...
She was right into skinning and tanning and stuff. She was
Really?
Yeah, she was.
It's not usually a feminine hobby.
Germans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm dating a German now, and I can tell you that they're into stuff that we're not. It's a completely different culture.
Yeah.
Super interesting though. Like every time we go past the German restaurant in Sydney, Gina's like, "Oh, let's go in." And I've got to get a pretzel. She loves the pretzels there.
Yeah, right.
And then it was funny. We went to the Carriage Works the other day, and
Look how smitten this guy is. For these people that can't see, this guy's so smitten
blushing.
right now.
We went to the Carriage Works, and Gina saw these cheese pretzels, and she's got so excited. She's like, "Oh, I gotta get this cheese pretzel." And gets this cheese pretzel, and then she's like, "This is shit. This isn't a pretzel."
Oh.
And then I found it in the door of my car like 2 days ago. So she's eaten like some of it, and then just stuffed it into the passenger door of the car. And I was like, "Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks. I'll clean that up."
I live on the Sunshine Coast, and one of the best farmers markets is literally a street away from mine. It's a 5-minute drive, but it's one street away.
Yeah.
And I always go. Normally, the ritual is go to the markets on Saturday and get mouth sausage, which is the German sausage. It's like sausage, but for your mouth.
Yeah.
Get a
That's got a different meaning in my house.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say is Gina's not wrong. Like a hot pretzel with a bit of butter.
They put acid.
Bro,
There's like
so good.
They actually put like an acid on. It's like a caustic acid on the real ones and stuff like that to make it the genuine ones. Yeah.
Well, the ones at the Bavarian, they put like rock salt on the top.
Rock salt.
It's so good.
Yeah, just a bit of butter.
They're hot
just some butter.
with the rock salt and the butter.
Yeah.
Bro, the Germans, and like a litre of beer, the Germans know what they're doing.
That would kill me.
They know what they're doing.
Two stand drinks and I'm anyone's.
Sometimes I wish they won the war, just so we'd have just so we'd have all their food. You know what I mean? It's all good.
Wait, hey, look, I'm driving a Volkswagen. So
I mean, look, they got the treatment of a certain section of society wrong, but I will say this: their meat dishes and stuff are delicious.
I like their cars too.
German cars. Yeah.
Volkswagens and Audis and BMWs.
So, what advice would you give to someone that, because there's a lot of people out there that want to do what you do and want to walk in the footsteps of knife makers. What advice would you give to someone that is starting out and wants to get into the trade?
Oh, I have thought about this a bit. It's
Save money.
No. Like don't invest too much if it's not for you.
Don't invest too much too soon is probably good advice for anyone looking to do anything.
I don't take my own advice. I'm terrible. all the toys and no idea. I would suggest joining a Facebook group. There's a few ones for Australian makers. Knife making, that is, like Australian Beginner Knife Making group, or the Knife Making Down Under group, or the Australian Blacksmithing and Bladesmithing, I think it is, and it's changed its name too. They're all great groups with lots of information. Touch base with a maker in your area and see if you can, politely ask if you can observe for the day or the weekend, or join in, or go for a class, even better. There's lots of makers that run classes. I run classes if you're on the Sunshine Coast or Queensland and you want to drive. Use a Nolan steel.
So your advice
don't use something that you're going to put time and effort into and money, and it not be able to be a finished knife at the end of it. It doesn't matter if it's the handle's too short, it's too blocky, or the grinds aren't perfect. It doesn't matter. Finish that knife. Just finish that knife, and then start another one. You only learn by doing. But going for a class or catching up with people at Hammering, there's a few around Australia that happen. I hold one at the end of May every year. People fly
So your
from Melbourne
advice would
for it.
be, and I was chiming in with this earlier, your advice would be to tag along to someone's workshop and just try and learn from someone that's already doing
reputable maker,
Yeah.
which there are so many in Australia.
Oh,
we're
heaps.
literally sport for choice for. You could throw a rock and hit a knife maker, especially in
You wouldn't want to
Newcastle.
hit a knife maker with a rock, but you could.
Well, from a distance.
Yeah, a safe distance.
Most of them are big bearded men, so they're not real quick either.
True, actually, that's quite true.
It's
So visit a knife maker, or at least get in contact with someone that's already in the trade, that's producing the type of things
they've
that
already
you're
made all
interested
the
in.
mistakes that you're
Yeah,
going to
and
make.
go and tag along and just be like a trades assistant, and just do whatever you can to help them out to get your foot in the door, learn the craft, and then take it from there.
Yep.
And when you do start out, you're saying use a known cheaper steel that you can.
Steel's cheap. Steel's the
Yeah.
cheapest part of
Something
the whole
with
knife making.
less opportunity for failure.
Yep, 1084.
1084. That seems to be the steel a lot of people start out on.
Yeah.
And there's not like you're still making
There's no-
knives out of it
there's-
now. It's not like there's anything wrong with it.
So if you go to a knife show in America and there's a $100,000 sword or Bowie there, $100,000. That Bowie's made out of 1084 and 15N20, which is the cheapest, most easily attainable
Stainless,
steel.
yeah.
No, just high carbon.
Isn't 15N20 stainless?
No, 1520 is a high nickel. I think it's like equivalent to like 1075 for carbon content. I'm probably wrong. I think it's probably less. 15N20, and it's just got high nickel in it, so it gives good contrast to the 1084, which has got 0.84% carbon and no nickel, from my knowledge.
Okay.
It's just the nickel content that gives the contrast, and it's still a hardenable steel.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're saying these super high-end products are
That's all they're made out of. They're
Yeah.
made out of like.
made out of a basic
They're made
steel.
out of maybe. To make that, you start with. You probably by the end of that process of making a big Damascus Bowie, you probably start with 2 kilos of steel, and you end up with 700 grams of steel. You lose half of it through the process of making a Damascus Bowie, and there's maybe I don't know how many processes involved, and it's as intricate as you want it to be, but it's just 1084, and it's what maybe $50 worth of 1084, and they're selling it for $100,000.
Wow.
Mind blowing. So it's the same material. That's what I'm doing now. It's the same material done different ways. Selling my processes are. I'm faster. The product's better. It's also more expensive at the moment. So as I'm getting better, the product's getting more expensive.
Which is a fair trade, right? Because anyone that gets better at their job inadvertently charges more money to do it.
Also getting quicker. So
Yeah, and so you could potentially pump out 2 knives for the time it used to take you to do 1.
yeah. When I do a course, I make a knife alongside that person. So,
Cool. So people can do this with you.
Yeah.
Step by step.
I do knife making classes. I set aside 1 weekend a month to do it normally. I've got one this weekend if I can lift my arm. But yeah, I make a knife alongside them, so that it's a very visual process. So I'll do the step and then step back. They do the same step back. And
One-on-one you do this?
yeah, one-on-one.
And a group as well?
Up to 3 people. Yeah.
Wow. So you'll make 3 knives with 3 people on the day?
Well, they all make their own knife, and I'll make a knife.
With them?
Yeah, with them. So at the end of the weekend, I've got a knife to sell too. But it's
Amazing.
normally-
Amazing.
It's so good. It's and everybody at the beginning is like, umming and ahhing themselves, and then at the end, there's this realization where they're like holding this finished product, and they're like, oh shit, I just made that.
And it wasn't that hard?
Well, it's just a process. I just got the process
it's a
down.
step-by-step process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they'll
Would you say you've streamlined it now so that anyone of any level can come and make a knife?
Yeah.
And you host this at your house?
Yep.
Incredible. So people can come to you in a day, so fly up in the morning, fly home in the afternoon with a knife.
They're all 2-day classes.
Oh, they're 2-day classes.
2-day classes. So to
So
properly temper takes 5 hours. So a tempering process takes 5 hours. The first day is a bit shorter. The second day is a bit longer. What I'm trying for the listeners, if you want to go to Luke's property over 2 days, so would you do it on a weekend? Yeah, most weekends.
Okay, so most weekends people can go to your property, and on a weekend they can come in at any level of knowing how to use tools or anything like that. They can come to your property, and by the end of the weekend they're leaving with a knife that they have made.
Yep, and there's 3 options. There's all the classes are 700. They're all 3 days. You've got the option of making a fully forged kitchen knife. So you actually draw the material out 3 times its original length, and you quench, and then it's a different process because the first day is more time because you're actually forging and you're working with volume control of the original bit of metal. Then you fit up with a hidden tang. There's no sheath for a kitchen knife. There's a bushcraft knife, which is a Scandi grind, high carbon. So you're doing the quench yourself. You're pulling it out of the forge at 815 degrees and dunking it into oil. So you get that whole, it's a rush. There's fire, there's flames, there's normally no blood. And then there's a utility or a hunting knife. But you design the knife too. Like there's guidance. If you come in with a preconceived idea, like it's like a 4 to 5 inch blade. The kitchen knife's about 8 inches, so it's a decent sized carving knife. There's also the option of doing it's like a 3/4 day course to make your own layered steel. So you can come to mine, make your own bar, and then leave with your bar and make your own knife out of it if you've got the equipment, or you can come back and do a class with me with that bar. And then make a sanmai or a gomai. So
there's the option to tag on an extra day to make a more high-end knife out of a more exotic material.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So I've probably done about 15 classes since I started, with a range of people and skills and backgrounds, and last guy was a yard maintenance guy, smashed out a knife, and when he saw what he made, he was like, oh shit, I made that. And these knives are to a level where I would be happy to sell them on a table. It's really, and for me, it's better than it's really fulfilling. So and that's what I'm all about, trying to get people involved in it, just in any sense of the word, just making in general, pottery or leather work, or silversmithing. It's all things that are, it helps you view the world differently because you look at something that's handmade and you can appreciate it more. So it's like photography, which I'm getting into photography. That's my advice. Oh my gosh.
I'm into photography and it's an expensive hobby. I remember
I've spent it all
early
already.
mornings
I'm all good
early mornings struggling through the settings on a camera on a DSLR to try and get like a low light image of a sunrise.
Mirrorless, man. Mirrorless.
Yeah, everyone says mirrorless, but then I know the photos are different. Like I prefer, everyone has a mirrorless camera if they have an iPhone.
True.
Right, so
iPhones are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, but if you take a DSLR, it just, for some reason, the images just turn out different.
It's the glass and it's...
I'm nostalgic like that, bro.
What camera you got?
It's a Canon.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, it's Canon, yeah.
What have you got?
I'll show you after the podcast.
Ooh.
It was like about $1,000, so nothing
tasteful
super...
nudes? Good for you.
Yeah, I needed to get the long lens for the nudes. I needed a micro lens. Macro, yeah. But I got a drone and all those sorts of things, and a GoPro, and I got the Mavic Air 2 because it fits really well in my hiking bag.
I got the
backpack.
Mini 3 Pro.
Yeah, it looks good.
It's so good.
Is that the one with the swiveling camera?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you like that feature?
I've used it once.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of
But
videos
it tracks. It's the smallest one that tracks. It's under 250 grams. So
where unreal how the tech that they're
30
doing
minutes
now.
flight time. Yeah.
That's as good as a Mavic Air 2, and it's like
Yeah.
half the size. And now I've seen heaps of videos where people are going landscape and then shifting it to portrait.
Yeah.
And those videos, those slow videos of like a sunset, they look unreal.
You can't rotate mid-record. I'm guessing they've done that post-edit somehow.
Yeah, somehow, yeah.
Because it's just geared towards social media, I suppose. That
Yes, that
the
flipping of
portrait.
it. Yeah. There must be an app that flips it, maybe. I've seen it says like turn your phone now, and you'll be holding your phone, and then you'll swivel your phone, and then it sort of like changes from either portrait to landscape, or it's very cool. Like it must be, maybe it is video editing, but
I'm still learning how to. Yeah, I've had drones. I took a drone around Australia on a motorbike, and you just can't capture what you want to capture and how vast it is
from like ground level.
Yeah, from ground level. Like you ride a motorbike around and you just sort of like, oh, this is cool, and you just send this, and it just shows how vast you are.
Drones have completely changed the landscape of amateur photography.
Yeah.
There are people now that go to JB Hi-Fi, get a Mavic Pro, and next minute they're producing images and photo quality that years ago would have been by some guy with a
pole on a
$5,000 mirrorless camera on a quadcopter. And
or a pole. Remember the old when they used to take photos of houses, and the guy would come and put the pole up on the 4-wheel drive and take a camera photo.
Those days are gone.
Gone. It's just
guys don't have poles anymore. Now they've got a drone that they send up.
And man buns.
Yeah.
What's happening with the world?
I don't have a thing against the man bun.
Really?
I don't. Nah. Like I don't. Well, one of my good mates, Cam, who I was on the show with, he used to wear his hair up in a man bun and then he'd wear it down. I actually thought it looked better in the man bun. To be fair, I like long hair on a man, unless you're like Jason Momoa. It just doesn't. I don't know. He pulls it off somehow.
Are you normally admiring men from
Always.
Nice.
Always. Yeah, I don't even look at women anymore. It's just all guys for me now.
That's the correct answer.
Yeah, I'm a tradie, bro. You're not going to pull that over me.
No, I know. I can't even. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, if I go into this slippery slope with you, it's just going to end badly for me.
Yeah. No, I learnt years ago that when the conversation starts going towards gay, that you have to out-gay the person that's going that way.
And the next minute
you're embarrass them
married with the guy that you work with. You're like,
just to show him a lesson. You know what I mean? Now I'm in an alternative relationship with this guy just because I refuse to quit. I think that's a good note.
I work for a local government, so yeah.
Lots of that.
Lots of that.
Lots of banter.
Yeah.
Well, why have we lost? Why is banter so offensive now?
Everyone's a bit sensitive.
Right? Everyone's a bit too sensitive. Like, what? Yeah.
People are angry.
I'm so over this cancel culture bullshit where it's like, oh, you can't say that. Fuck that. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Like, and what are you going to do about it?
People are angry.
Who cares? Who gives a fuck if it makes someone angry? Like, I'm not responsible, right, for someone else's feelings. And something I say might be taken as a joke to one person and highly offensive to someone else. Well, like,
it's got to be in context.
Fair enough. If you want to be offended, that's fine.
I mean,
but like,
you know better than
my job to not offend you.
You know better than most people. A lot of things can be taken out of context, I suppose.
Well, yeah,
or perceived differently, or
I think it's a much harder now for people to think that I'm anything like I was on maths. When I'm sitting here talking unedited, and they can get my sense of humor, and they can get that I'm, my personality a bit more. Whereas, and I think that's what you were getting at with the out of context thing, is that if you, like, what people don't understand is, and I keep trying to drill this home to people, is if you and I have an argument, right, and they only show your point of view for the argument, and they edit all of my points out, I look like I'm the issue. I look like you've got all of these grievances against me, and then I'm the problem, or vice versa.
This is a good point. This is a good time to point out that I haven't watched one episode of Mary.
But you know of the show, right? And you know of my experience on the show. I'm sure a lot of people have told you about it.
Yeah. Also haven't watched TV for about 15 years.
Ah, good. It's brain dead programming anyway. It's for entertainment. Or like vice versa. Like I could sit here now and edit everything down.
I hope you do.
Yeah.
Make me look like that.
But I could edit
be a
everything
villain.
down that you've said, and I could make you look like a complete dumbass. I could put in.
You won't
I
have
could
to.
put
You
in-
just send that. And
just send that
Yeah.
unedited.
Full send.
But I could. The point I'm making is that I could take one answer from one question, and I could ask a completely different question, and I could put that answer in.
You're saying that's what the
And
producers did
people,
on that.
that's
same
exactly
show?
what the producers do.
Oh wow.
They jumble conversations around. They jumble look like everyone's accused me of smirking at Jesse and Claire. I'm not even looking in their fucking direction. Like every time people have
wasn't in the
accused me
same
of
room at
something,
the same
it's,
time. Yeah.
yeah, it's just it just comes down to how they edit the show, and people need to
entertainment.
realize
It's
that it's
drama.
entertainment. Like, and
This
those
isn't real
looks-
life, people. It's not normal.
It's not.
No.
It's not. But
People want
but
drama. People crave drama in their life.
They crave it, mate. Yeah.
I know. It's a shame. I just want. I don't know what I want, but it's not drama.
Well, and also, there's people out there that want to not like you, and then the show provides them with the confirmation bias. I know there's people out there that don't like me, and then they saw me on the show, and they like
By association,
"Look, the
they
show
don't like me now.
No, they'll like you.
Ah,
Mate, you could sit down with anyone.
maybe after the editing they won't.
You could sit down with anyone that's unlikable and still come across as yourself. That's not an issue. And I think that people that have used the show as confirmation bias to go, look, he is like that. Look at what the show is. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like they're just people that want it to be true
you
way
can't-
more than they actually believe it.
You know, you can't be intelligent and attractive, and just choose one, can you, please?
Correct.
And just stick
yeah.
to it, Harry.
No,
That's it.
I refuse to. I'm going to stay with both intelligent and mildly attractive. I just think that like I was saying, there's people out there that want that shit to be true way more than they believe it. Really,
Yeah.
they just want it to be true.
And at the end of the day, you are just literally, you're a tradie bloke that
Yeah.
likes
Yeah,
things and
I'm just not going to put up with shit from people.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with that?
a bit more, yeah.
The funny thing is, for every one person that doesn't like me for the way I was on the show, and it's usually the Karens out there, mate, I get so many messages from people, men and women, that are like, I loved you on the show. You were the realest one in there. You owned your shit, you called everyone else out, and you were real. And if you look at season 10 of Married at First Sight, would they have even had a show this year if I wasn't on it? Probably not. It would have been boring as fuck.
You were the catalyst.
Well, I mean, there was other little things that happened, like between Jesse and Claire and Evelyn and Dan. Like, there were little things that happened along the way, but for some reason, the show this year seemed to completely center around me.
Yeah.
And, for better or worse, I was the main character of this year. And yeah, it is what
And
it is.
that's why you've got a podcast now.
No, that's not the reason. I probably would have started this even if I wasn't on the show, because I like having conversations with interesting people and then giving other people the opportunity to listen to those
Hopefully you get some
conversations.
interesting people on this show.
Yeah. Well, we
Continue to.
ran out of time and low budget, so
Get me in.
yeah. But the thing is, people love this. They love listening to conversations. I think it's a human thing. Is you learn by listening to people converse about their experiences. And there's nothing better than listening to someone who's interesting and has an interesting story to tell.
Passionate about something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's passionate about performing balloon tricks at a children's birthday party. If that's what you're into and you're good at it, talk about it. It's interesting. You know what I mean? But
Before Knives, it was small batch sort of automotive custom parts like plenums and turbo manifolds and stuff like that, or intercooler
you
plumbing.
love cars. I know you love cars.
Love going
Motorbikes,
fast.
cars, yeah.
Never taken drugs in my life. I had an unhealthy addiction to going fast. I think life begins over 300 on the road, personally. Everything else changes after that. But yeah, I mean, I turbocharged my first car when I was 17. I fuel injected and turbocharged it when I was 17. So I was doing that in the shed to begin with. There was no money on the coast for cars and stuff like that. No one had any money. Everyone wanted 1,000 horsepower and had no money. Then it was like custom bikes, and I got quite well known for making like ridiculous rideable art. And then somehow I had all the tools and lathes and everything to do knife making, and it just took off, and I've just sort of really lent into it, and the whole property sort of revolves around having the hammer in once a year, and I've got 40 kilo power hammers and pneumatic power hammers, and it's just
What's a power hammer for someone that doesn't know?
it's a self-contained pump with pistons that pushes and pulls a 40 kilo weight up and then brings it down with valves. So it's a 40 kilo falling weight, but it's actually pushed down by the air pressure. So it's a 3-phase motor that powers this. If you type in pneumatic power hammer, it's about 2 ton of steel, and I bought it from far north Queensland and went up and picked it up and dragged it back. And it moves metal. It's all about working smart, not hard. So I'm like 5'7", 65 kilos. Peak performance for a stock removal knife maker. Peak performance. Can swing a hammer, but regardless, if you want to do it for the long term, work smart. So I've got 20 ton presses. I've got a 40 kilo power hammer, so I can draw out material, I can flatten material on different dies, I've got combination dies, flattening and drawing dies on both pieces of equipment. Yeah, want to get into 3D, I know we're probably going over time, but
No such thing.
3D printing has I've got a 3D printer now too, all the toys are no idea. So you can print in PLA patterns, you put that...
What's a PLA pattern?
Well, you can print in PLA, so it's the media you print in, and it's cornstarch, I think. It's from cornstarch, I believe. So you can print very thin walls, extruded shapes, put it into a canister, put different powdered steel in different parts of the extruded shape, put it in a canister, consolidate that powdered steel into one piece of steel with like high nickel and high carbon steel, and you get a contrasting image. You can actually print whatever you want into the steel now, and the PLA just burns out and becomes carbon and disappears completely and gets absorbed into the steel on either side. No line, no nothing. I'll show you photos afterwards.
Wow.
So limitless to what you can actually
print into a knife.
And if you layer that up with a core steel to keep it lineal, you've got that lineal strength. But yeah, that's things to look forward to in the future. I've got all the tools and equipment and materials. I just need to find the time.
That was the main concern with 3D printing, where it's great that you're talking about printing it into a knife, but there's
printing forms to hold powdered steel in separate parts so that you can form it into.
Well, that was the concern with 3D printing, is people can
guns.
Knives and guns, yeah. And I think as technology advances, we're going to get closer to things that help us and closer to things that damage us. So I truly believe that they will start to inject organic matter into a 3D printer, and we may see the first 3D printed organs.
They've got 3D printed meats.
Yeah.
That look like steak.
Yeah, but I'm talking like, say, for people that need a heart transplant or a lung, they would be able to 3D print that and just put it in someone.
Harry's secretly a vegan, don't tell anyone.
Mate, I love steak way too much. But then on the flip side of that technology, right, is 3D printing weapons of war. So it's an interesting conversation to have, where that technology is so useful on the one hand.
You can 3D print metal and stuff now too.
Yeah. I've seen 3D printed houses where they put cement mixture into a control arm, and it just goes around and prints walls, entire walls for a house. It's crazy.
I don't know how that works with steel and stuff in Rio. I think it's very gimmicky. It's at the moment in my job, we've got AI trying to replace what we do, which is asset conditions. So we've got phones and cameras trying to do the same thing, and it's close, but it's not there yet. Be interesting. Next couple of years, see what happens.
So last, I wanted to ask you, when people leave your workshop on those 2 or 3 day, if you combine the bar stock that they're making into those courses, they're leaving with a complete knife.
Yep, heat treated, and you do all of it.
Would
There's
they?
very little guide.
Yeah. So along the process, they would then know how to replicate that again, right? They could now go into knife making themselves.
Correct.
For
So
$700.
I'll ask them to start with if they just want to make a knife or they want to make knives. And there's a big difference to how I run the course. So I will explain each step if they want to make knives. If they just want to make a knife and just have the experience and then do a silversmith class the next week or a pottery class the next week, they're just having experiences.
So people are going for those like artesian style courses where they're just picking up a skill as they go along.
But some people
won't go into as much detail as someone that wants to make knives professionally.
Yeah, I'll give them all the details of why I do it and the process and why I do that way.
Okay. Well, I actually think that it ties into the question I asked you earlier about what advice would you give. Maybe the best advice for someone looking to do this is to attend your course.
Yes, or any other maker. There's a lot of makers, depending
on
where
there
you
other
are.
makers out there doing what you're doing?
There's people in all states that do it, yeah.
Okay.
And there's a few in Queensland, there's a few in Melbourne area and Sydney and Perth, and even in, I'm not sure about Darwin, but there's a few in Alice Springs that will run courses, knife making courses.
Can you choose your steel that you make the knife out of?
To a degree. I don't offer stainless because it's
more investive process, yeah?
It's more difficult, it's more expensive, and also I find you don't have the fire and the forge and the quench into oil, and that's
part of the process,
part of the experience.
Yeah.
This is so when you do a high carbon knife with me, it's all high carbon, and it's part of the process and part of the experience
of quenching a knife
in oil.
Yeah. That traditional flames and sparks and all the cool stuff that goes into making a knife, and that I'd say that experience would stay with you a lot longer than if you made a stainless knife or a high-end stainless knife.
It's
a
very
bit more clinical,
anticlimactic.
right?
It's just like it's hot and you take it out and put aluminium plates on top of each other and then put some air on it. And you're like, oh, that was
a bit more of a clinical procedure rather than
with
the high carbon. You can sort of get a bit more nitty-gritty and
feel it and burn your eyebrows off. And
so, if someone wanted to find you and reach you to do this course to learn to make a knife, how would they find you?
Just through socials. No, I think a website takes the fun out of it again. But
do you have a website for it?
No.
So just social media.
Just social media.
Yep. And it's Makesmith on Instagram.
Make_Smith on Instagram and just Makesmith on Facebook.
Or they can contact you directly, Luke Berkelmans.
Yeah, sure.
Just reach out and say, hey.
Reach out and say, hey, or like,
stabby thing.
Yeah, you inspired me to my whole things about who have I inspired, how have I contributed, what's my worth, what have I given back. I feel very privileged to have the property, have these tools, have a great bunch of friends that are into it, and people around me that are supportive. I feel very lucky, so I try and give back. That's why I do the hammering once a year. Yeah.
Nice. Well, if anyone out there listening wants to, learn to make a knife and support a local business, a small business, get in contact with Luke.
Hobbyist. Extreme hobbyist,
yeah.
Probably.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Make_Smith on Instagram.
Yep.
Even if they just want to see what you do or purchase a ready-made knife, they can. But if they want to do the course or they want to learn to do what you do,
or order a custom, as much as I don't want to, but yeah.
Just do that. Just annoy him with a really out there outlandish custom order. I mean, you'll pay for it, but I mean, can you really put a price on annoying someone? Mate, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having
me.
Great chat.
I appreciate it, and thanks for being so gentle last night.